A 12-year-old boy stands in front of a fence taller than any wall he's ever climbed, staring at a stretch of forest so thick with trees that sunlight barely touches the ground beneath it. Warning signs are nailed into the wood every few meters. Not the kind that say no trespassing. The kind that say people don't come back out of here the same way they went in, if they come back out at all. And somehow, out of everyone standing at that fence line today, this one boy is the only person paying attention to the right things. If you're new to this channel, welcome. You're about to watch a version of Naruto Uzumaki that the Chunin exams never saw coming. And if you've been here before, you already know the drill. Hit subscribe, ring that bell, because what happens in the next 10 minutes of forest time is going to rewrite everything you thought you knew about who's really the smartest person in that clearing. Let's get into it. The 44th Training Ground. That's the official name. Nobody calls it that. Everybody calls it the Forest of Death, and for good reason. The kind of reason that becomes very, very obvious about 4 seconds after you step through the gate. Team 7 stands at Gate 12, one of 44 scattered around the massive circular fence line, each team assigned its own entry point so that no two teams start in the same place. Naruto Uzumaki, Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno. 3 genin, freshly registered for the second exam, freshly handed a scroll that could either make their careers or end them. Behind them, dozens of other teams are lined up at their own gates, each one clutching either a heaven scroll or an earth scroll, never both. That's the whole point. You need one of each to advance. You need to survive the forest to get there. And you need to survive each other, because every other genin team scattered across those 44 gates wants exactly what you have. Enko Mitarashi, the proctor for this exam, had made that part very clear about 20 minutes earlier, back at the briefing area, with a grin that suggested she found the whole thing genuinely entertaining. People die doing this, she'd said, holding up a stack of consent forms like they were party invitations. Sign here if that's fine with you. Sakura had gone pale. Sasuke hadn't blinked. And Naruto, well, here's where it gets interesting. Naruto had signed his form the same as everyone else. Same shrug, same grin, same come on, it can't be that bad energy that everybody in that room expected from him. Nobody looked twice. Why would they? This is Naruto Uzumaki we're talking about. The loudest genin in the Leaf Village, the one who failed the academy exam twice, the one who still can't do a basic clone jutsu without it collapsing into smoke. Nobody in that briefing room was looking at him and thinking strategist. But if you'd been close enough, really close enough to see past the grin, you'd have noticed his eyes doing something they don't usually do. Counting. Measuring the room. Clocking exits. That's new. And it didn't start today. Let's rewind for a second, because context matters here. In the weeks leading up to this exam, something had been shifting in Naruto that nobody bothered to track, because nobody was looking for it. Kakashi had been running the team through drills, nothing dramatic, just the standard Jonin sensei stuff, terrain awareness, chakra control, the basics of reading an opponent's stance before they move. The kind of lessons that go in one ear and out the other for most 12-year-olds who'd rather be doing something flashier. Except Naruto had been listening. Not to the parts where Kakashi explained jutsu theory. His eyes still glazed over for that. But to the offhand comments. The little asides Kakashi would drop mid-lecture, almost like he wasn't expecting anyone to catch them. Things like the ground tells you more than the enemy does, if you know how to read it, or most fights are won before anyone throws a punch. They're won in the setup. Sasuke absorbed that stuff on purpose, taking mental notes like it was homework for a test he intended to ace. Sakura absorbed it the way she absorbed everything, carefully, dutifully, filed away for later. Naruto absorbed it the way he absorbs most things, sideways, half distracted, apparently not paying attention at all. And then, weeks later, it comes back out of him in a way nobody expected, because it turns out he'd been chewing on it the entire time. There's also the matter of the fox. Deep inside Naruto, behind bars sealed by his own father on the night he was born, something ancient and enormously powerful has been watching this whole exam unfold with the weary patience of a creature that's outlived several villages. Kurama doesn't usually bother offering opinions. Kurama has made it extremely clear, on multiple occasions, that Naruto's survival is a matter of self-interest and nothing more. After all, if the container dies, so does the passenger. But lately, that voice in the back of Naruto's head has started doing something new. Not encouragement. Not friendliness. Just warnings. Small ones. A flicker of unease when something's about to go wrong. A pulse of chakra when danger gets close enough to matter. It's not a bond yet. It's barely a truce. But it's there, and it's growing, and it's about to matter more than either of them realizes. Alright, listen up, Enko's voice cuts through the noise at gate 12, snapping Naruto's attention back to the present. She's standing with a clipboard, checking off team names as the gates prepare to open across the training ground. Once that gate opens, you've got exactly 5 days to get to the tower in the center of the forest with both scrolls. Heaven and earth. You lose your scroll, you're out. You miss the deadline, you're out. You die. We get it, Sasuke says flatly. Enko grins wider. Just making sure. Good luck. You're gonna need it. Sakura's hand tightens around the strap of her pack. She glances sideways at her teammates, first at Sasuke, calm and unreadable as always, then at Naruto, and that's when she notices it. The first small thing. Naruto isn't looking at the gate. He's looking past it, into the tree line, scanning the canopy the way you'd study a map before a long trip. His lips are moving slightly, and if she leaned in close enough, she'd realize he's counting something. Trees, maybe? Distance. She can't tell. You okay? She asks. Huh. Naruto blinks, and just like that, the focus melts away, replaced by his usual grin. Yeah. I'm great. Let's go kick some forest of death, but Sakura frowns, unconvinced, but doesn't push it. There isn't time. The gate horn sounds, a low, rolling blast that echoes across the training ground from all 44 entry points at once, and the massive iron gate in front of them grinds open. Go, Kakashi says from somewhere behind them, appearing just long enough to see his team off, one hand raised in a lazy wave, his visible eye crinkled in something that might be amusement, or might be genuine concern. With Kakashi, it's often hard to tell. Try not to die. I'd hate to fill out the paperwork. And then the gate is fully open, and the three of them step through, and the sound of the outside world, the crowd, the other teams, the proctors, the whole apparatus of the Chunin exam, fades behind them into the deep, humid green of the forest of death. Here's the thing about this forest that the warning signs don't fully capture. It's not just dangerous because of the other genin teams hunting for scrolls. It's dangerous because everything in here wants you dead. The wildlife alone is enough to end a shinobi's career. Oversized tigers with claws like kunai, venomous snakes thick as a grown man's thigh, leeches that can drain a person dry in minutes if you're careless enough to wade through the wrong stream. The trees themselves grow so densely that sunlight becomes a rumor more than a reality, and the undergrowth swallows footprints almost as fast as you make them. It is, in short, exactly the kind of place where a genin team needs to move fast, stay quiet, and trust each other completely. Team 7 does the first two just fine. It's the third one that's about to get complicated. They move through the underbrush in a loose formation, Sasuke on point, Sakura in the middle, Naruto bringing up the rear, which is standard positioning for them by now. Sasuke's the strongest fighter, so he leads. Sakura's the sharpest analytical mind on paper, so she stays central to relay information. And Naruto's back there because everyone assumes rear guard is the least demanding position. The one you give to the teammate you're not entirely counting on, except Naruto's using that assumption. He's using it the same way he's used being underestimated his whole life, quietly, without announcing it, letting people believe exactly what they already believe about him, while he does something else entirely underneath. What's he doing back there? Watching. Not the way Sasuke watches, sharp-eyed, threat assessment focused, always looking for the next enemy. Naruto's watching the forest itself. The shape of the canopy, the places where the underbrush has been disturbed recently, versus the places that look undisturbed for weeks. The direction the wind's moving, and what that means for scent and sound carrying. Little things. Things that don't look like anything on their own. It's the kind of pattern noticing that doesn't come from genius. It comes from repetition, from a kid who spent years of his life learning, without ever fully realizing it, how to read a room full of people who didn't want him there. How to notice which villagers were about to shout, which ones were about to throw something, which alleys had exits and which ones didn't. Survival instincts sharpened in a very different kind of forest, long before this one. Nobody ever gave him credit for that. Why would they? It doesn't look like strength. It doesn't look like talent. It just looks like a kid staying quiet in the back of the group. Until it doesn't. About 2 hours in, they stop at a small clearing near a freshwater stream to refill canteens and catch their breath. Sakura crouches by the water, filling her canteen, while Sasuke stands watch a few meters off, arms crossed, eyes scanning the tree line with the kind of vigilance that never really switches off. Naruto crouches near the tree line, ostensibly checking his own supplies. In reality, he's doing something else, pressing his palm flat against the bark of a nearby tree, feeling for something. Vibration, chakra residue. Anything that might tell him whether something's passed through here recently, and if so, how big, how fast, how dangerous. You're being paranoid, he tells himself. You're being smart, something else answers. Low, gravelly, coming from somewhere deep inside him that he still doesn't fully understand. There's a difference. Learn it. Naruto's hand stills against the bark. That voice doesn't talk to him often. When it does, it's usually complaining, or mocking, or reminding him, in exactly as many words as necessary and not one more, that his survival is a matter of shared interest, nothing personal. It has never once offered him a compliment. This is the closest it's ever come. You say something? Sakura calls over, glancing up from the stream. Nope. Naruto straightens quickly, flashing his usual grin, pack slung back over his shoulder. Just checking the trees for good luck. Believe it! Sakura gives him a strange look, not suspicious exactly, more puzzled. The way you look at a puzzle piece that doesn't quite match the picture on the box. Before shrugging it off and screwing the cap back onto her canteen, Sasuke doesn't look over at all. Sasuke's too busy watching the trees on the other side of the clearing, where something, he can't quite place what, has made the hair on the back of his neck stand up for the last 30 seconds. He doesn't say anything either. Not yet. They press on. The forest doesn't get any friendlier as the day wears on. If anything, it gets louder, the deeper they go, filled with the distant shrieks of animals, the occasional far-off explosion of a jutsu that means some other team just ran into trouble. Team 7 avoids 2 separate skirmishes by sheer route planning, cutting wide around the sound of combat rather than walking into it, which is smart, standard genin strategy. Nothing unusual there. What is unusual, subtly, quietly unusual, is how often it's Naruto who suggests the detour. Let's go around here, he says at one point, angling them away from a ravine that, on the surface, looks like a perfectly reasonable shortcut. Why? Sasuke asks, already annoyed at the pace loss. Naruto shrugs. Feels weird. That's not a reason. It's my reason, Naruto says, and there's something in his tone, not defined exactly, just certain, that makes Sasuke pause for half a second before grudgingly following the detour anyway. 20 minutes later, they hear a scream from the direction of the ravine, followed by the telltale crack of a fire-style jutsu, and then silence. Whatever team went through there instead of around it just ran into something they didn't route around in time. Sasuke doesn't say anything about it. But he notices. He files it away the same careful way Sakura files things away, a small data point that doesn't fit the picture he's had of his teammate for the last several months. By the time the sun starts sinking behind the impossibly thick canopy, casting the whole forest into a deeper, colder kind of green-black shadow, Team 7 has covered a decent stretch of ground without a single confrontation. No scroll exchanged. No fights. No injuries. Which, in a place called the Forest of Death, is either extremely good luck or extremely good instincts. Guess which one it actually is. They make camp as the light fails completely. A small hollow beneath a cluster of roots, defensible on 3 sides, with only one clear approach that they can watch collectively. Sasuke picks the spot. It's a good one, and even Naruto, quietly cataloging sight lines the way he's been doing all day, has no notes to add. I'll take first watch, Sasuke says, settling with his back against the largest root, kunai resting loosely in one hand. I'll take second, Sakura offers. That leaves Naruto with third watch, the deepest part of the night, the hardest one to stay awake through. Traditionally considered the safest slot because most ambushes happen either right at dusk or right before dawn. Nobody says it out loud, but there's an unspoken logic to the rotation. Give the least reliable watch to the person you trust least to notice something going wrong in the dark. Naruto doesn't argue. He just nods, wraps himself in his jacket, and pretends to drift off to sleep while Sasuke keeps watch. He isn't actually asleep. Not for a long time, lying there in the dark, listening to the forest breathe around him, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of some nocturnal bird, the steady rhythm of Sasuke's watchful stillness a few meters away, Naruto lets his mind do the thing it's been doing more and more lately. Turning problems over. Chewing on details. Looking for the pattern underneath the noise. Something's wrong with this exam, he thinks. Not wrong like this is a dangerous test, wrong like, there's a piece of this that doesn't add up. He can't place it yet. It's a feeling more than a fact, the same kind of low, prickling unease that made him steer the team away from that ravine earlier. But it's been building all day, layer by layer, and it isn't fading with distance the way ordinary nerves usually would. You feel it too, he thinks, not quite a question, directed inward at the presence he can never fully ignore. There's a pause. A long one. And then, finally, that low voice answers, quieter than usual, almost, though he'd never admit this out loud, even to himself, careful. Something crossed this forest a few hours ago. Something old. Something that doesn't belong here, not the way the rest of this place belongs here. Naruto's eyes open in the dark. What do you mean, doesn't belong? I mean the chakra I felt wasn't animal, and it wasn't genin, and it wasn't Proctor. It was old, and it was patient, and it was moving in a straight line that had nothing to do with a scroll. That last part sticks with him. A straight line that had nothing to do with a scroll. Every genin team in this forest is moving with a purpose tied to survival and advancement. Hunting scrolls, avoiding fights, racing the clock toward the tower. Whatever Kurama sensed wasn't doing any of that. It was hunting something else. Where was it headed? Naruto asks, sitting up slightly now, careful not to make noise, careful not to draw Sasuke's attention from across the campsite. I don't know exactly. But it was close enough, hours ago, that I felt it at all, and I don't usually feel things from that far away unless they're paying very close attention to something. Or someone. Naruto sits with that for a long moment, staring out into the dark tangle of trees beyond their camp, listening to the forest's ordinary nighttime sounds and wondering, for the first time since stepping through Gate 12, whether ordinary is really the right word for any of it. His turn on watch comes a few hours later. Sasuke wakes him with a light tap on the shoulder, murmurs something about nothing unusual, and settles down to sleep without another word. Sakura's watch had passed the same way, apparently, quiet, uneventful, nothing worth reporting. Naruto sits up against the roots, kunai resting across his knee, and settles into the stillness of the deep night. The forest around them has gone quieter now, the way forests do in the hour before the birds start waking, a hell-breath kind of silence that feels less like peace and more like anticipation. He runs through the day in his head. The gate. The stream. The ravine they avoided. The scream that followed 20 minutes later. Kurama's warning about the chakra crossing the forest, old and patient and moving with purpose. None of this is random, he thinks. Something's watching this whole exam. Not like a proctor watches it. Like something's picking through it, looking for something specific. The question that keeps circling back, the one he can't quite shake, is simple and uncomfortable. What if it's not looking for a scroll at all? What if it's looking for a person? He doesn't have an answer. Not yet. But the question itself is enough to keep him fully, completely awake for the rest of his watch, senses stretched out into the dark, cataloging every rustle and creak the way he's spent the whole day quietly teaching himself to do. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't going to be one of those watches where nothing happens. And if you want to see exactly what Naruto's about to walk into, subscribe now, because Chapter 2 is where this whole exam stops being ordinary. It happens just before the first hint of gray creeps into the sky. There's no warning sound. No snapped twig, no rustle of leaves, nothing a normal set of ears would catch. If Naruto had been relying on his ears alone, he would have missed it completely, the same way Sasuke and Sakura, both still deeply asleep a few meters away, miss it entirely. But something inside him doesn't miss it. Something old, and patient, and suddenly, sharply alert. There, Kurama's voice cuts through his thoughts, low and urgent in a way it has never once been before. That's it. That's the chakra I felt earlier. It's close. It's very close, and it just changed direction. Naruto's spine goes rigid. His grip tightens on the kunai resting across his knee, and his eyes sweep the tree line in a slow, careful arc, looking for anything, a shape, a shadow, a disturbance in the pattern of darkness between the trees. Change direction how? It was moving parallel to your position. Now it's moving toward it. The forest around him is dead silent. No birds yet. No wind. Just the vast, breathing stillness of a place that has swallowed more shinobi than anyone likes to count, and somewhere out there in that stillness, something ancient and deliberate has just decided that Team 7's little hollow beneath the roots is worth a closer look. Naruto doesn't wake Sasuke. Not yet. He doesn't wake Sakura either. Some instinct, the same one that's been quietly sharpening itself for weeks without him fully realizing it, tells him that the worst thing he could do right now is make noise, make movement, make himself into something worth reacting to. So he sits very still, kunai in hand, breath even and slow, and he waits. And somewhere out there in the deep, patient dark of the forest of death, something waits too. The sky hasn't even started to lighten yet. 5 days of exam left. And Naruto Uzumaki, the loudest genin in the Hidden Leaf Village, the one nobody thought to watch closely, has just become the only member of his team who knows, with absolute certainty, that they are no longer alone. What if Naruto outsmarted Orochimaru in the Forest of Death? Chapter 2, First Contact. Last time, we left Naruto sitting wide awake in the dark, watching a tree line that had just gone from quiet forest to something ancient is moving toward us in the space of about 10 seconds, and neither of his teammates had any idea. If you're just joining us, go back and catch Chapter 1 first, because this next part is going to hit a lot harder if you know what Naruto already knows. And if you're all caught up, welcome back, subscribe if you haven't, and let's find out exactly what's been stalking Team 7 through the dark. The sky doesn't lighten all at once. It happens in degrees, the black overhead fading first to a deep bruise blue, then to gray, then finally to the pale gold-green light that filters weakly through the forest of death's impossibly thick canopy. It's the kind of dawn that takes its time, like the forest itself is reluctant to let the day in. Naruto watches every second of it happen without moving. He hasn't taken his eyes off the tree line since Kurama's warning cut through him hours ago. His legs have gone stiff from sitting in the same position too long. His kunai hand has cramped twice, and every muscle in his back aches from holding himself perfectly, deliberately still. But he doesn't shift. He doesn't fidget. He doesn't do any of the things Naruto Uzumaki is famous for doing when he's bored or restless, which, admittedly, is most of the time. Because right now, for maybe the first time in his life, being still and quiet feels like the smartest thing he's ever done. Anything? He asks silently, for what feels like the 40th time that hour. It stopped, Kurama answers, and there's something almost thoughtful in the way the fox says it, like even the massive chakra beast locked in his gut is a little unsettled by what it's tracking. About 20 minutes ago. It's not moving anymore. It's just there. Watching, maybe, or waiting for something. Waiting for what? If I knew that, Kurama says, dry as ever, I'd have told you already, brat. Just watch the tree line. So Naruto watches the tree line. The first birds start calling somewhere overhead. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary forest morning slowly reasserting themselves, as if the night's strange tension had simply been a bad dream. Sasuke stirs a few meters away, blinking awake, immediately alert the way he always is, no drowsy in-between stage. Sakura wakes a moment later, yawning, stretching, glancing around the small hollow with the mild disorientation of someone who slept better than she expected to in a forest full of things that want to eat her. Morning, Sasuke says, more statement than greeting, already running a quick assessment of the camp, the light, the time. Anything happen on your watch? And here's the question, isn't it? The one that's been sitting in Naruto's chest since the sky started turning gray. Does he say something? Does he tell them what Kurama sensed? The old, patient chakra moving through the forest with purpose, changing direction toward their camp, and then just stopping? If he tells them, what does he even say? A fox that lives in my stomach woke me up in the middle of the night to warn me about a feeling? Sakura would think he'd had a nightmare. Sasuke would probably just be annoyed at the interruption to an otherwise clean watch rotation. Neither of them has any reason to trust a warning they can't verify, from a source Naruto's never fully explained to either of them. So Naruto does something that, 6 months ago, wouldn't have occurred to him at all. He decides to be careful with the truth instead of loud with it. Nothing big, he says, which isn't a lie, not exactly. Just felt kinda watched for a bit. Probably nothing. Sakura raises an eyebrow. Watched how? I dunno. Forest feeling. You know. He shrugs, already reaching for his pack, already burying the moment under the kind of deflection that's always worked for him before. Probably just some animal sniffing around. This place is crawling with weird stuff. It's a good enough answer. Sasuke accepts it with a short nod and turns his attention to breaking camp. Sakura lingers a half-second longer, studying Naruto with that same puzzled expression she's been giving him on and off since yesterday, like she's noticed the picture doesn't quite match the frame, but hasn't figured out why yet. Naruto doesn't meet her eyes. He's too busy scanning the tree line one more time, cataloging exactly where the light falls, where the shadows pool, which directions offer cover and which offer exposure, filing it all away. Just in case. Just in case of what, he thinks, shouldering his pack. I don't even know yet. But I've got a feeling I'm about to find out. They move out within the hour, Sasuke on point as usual, Sakura relaying terrain notes from the middle, Naruto bringing up the rear with senses stretched thin and alert in a way none of his teammates would recognize if they looked closely enough, which, so far, they haven't. The forest today feels different than it did yesterday. Not in any way Sakura or Sasuke could put a finger on. The trees are the same suffocating density, the undergrowth just as thick, the distant sounds of wildlife and the occasional far-off skirmish just as present as before. But Naruto feels it in a way that has nothing to do with normal senses. A kind of pressure in the air, faint but constant, like the forest itself is holding its breath around them. Is it still there? He asks Kurama for the 10th time that morning. It's not gone, Kurama says. But it's not close either. It's circling. Patient. Whatever it is, it's not in a hurry. That's not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be. They stop briefly around mid-morning to check their bearings, Sasuke pulling out the small compass they'd been issued, cross-referencing it against the position of the sun where it manages to filter down through gaps in the canopy. According to their rough calculations, they're making decent progress toward the tower, though without a second scroll. Reaching it early would accomplish nothing except getting there and having to leave again. We need a scroll exchange, Sakura says, stating the obvious. We've got heaven. We need earth. We'll find a team, Sasuke says, with the flat confidence of someone who's never once doubted his own ability to win a fight when it matters. Or one'll find us. That's usually how it goes in this exam. Teams either hunt each other deliberately, hoping to seize the scroll they're missing, or stumble into confrontations by accident, forced into combat by proximity and desperation. Either way, sooner or later blood gets spilled over a piece of paper. Naruto, half listening to the conversation, is doing something else with his attention. He's watching a particular stretch of underbrush about 30 meters ahead, not because anything about it looks wrong, exactly, but because the birds have gone quiet there. Not the general quiet of the deep forest. A specific, localized quiet, like something in that patch of trees has made the local wildlife decide silence is the smarter option. There, he thinks, and he doesn't need to ask Kurama to confirm it. He can feel the fox's attention sharpen the same way his own has, both of them fixed on the same patch of unnaturally still trees. It's close now, Kurama says, voice low and careful. Closer than it's been all morning. And it's not circling anymore. Hey, Naruto says, keeping his voice light, casual, the exact opposite of the alarm bells going off inside him. Maybe we take a break up ahead? I'm starving. Sasuke shoots him an irritated look. They'd only stopped an hour ago, but Sakura, ever practical, checks the position of the sun and nods. We should eat something before midday anyway. There's a clearing marked on the map a little further up. A little further up happens to be almost exactly where the birds went quiet. Naruto doesn't say anything about that. He just falls into step, senses stretched taut, and lets his teammates lead them directly toward whatever's been waiting all morning to be found. The clearing, when they reach it, looks perfectly ordinary. A wide gap in the canopy lets actual sunlight pour down for the first time since they entered the forest, illuminating a patch of soft grass and a small trickle of a stream cutting along one edge. It's the kind of place that, under any other circumstances, would feel like a relief after hours of suffocating undergrowth. Sakura visibly relaxes as they step into the open, already reaching for her canteen. Sasuke does a quick perimeter scan out of habit, finds nothing immediately alarming, and allows himself to lower his guard by maybe 5%, which, for Sasuke, counts as fully relaxing. Naruto doesn't relax at all. It's here, Kurama says. Close. Very close. I don't know exactly where, but it's watching this clearing right now. Naruto's eyes sweep the tree leaves slowly, carefully, trying not to look like he's doing anything more than idle scanning. Nothing moves. Nothing looks out of place. And yet the sensation of being watched, that low, prickling awareness he'd shrugged off that morning as forest feeling, has gotten strong enough now that even without Kurama's confirmation, he'd know something was wrong. You two eat, he says, already moving toward the tree lean on the pretense of checking their surroundings. I'll keep watch. You're always hungry, Sakura points out. This is a first. Gotta stay sharp, Naruto says, flashing a grin that feels thinner than it should. Someone's gotta watch our backs while you guys stuff your faces, right? Sasuke gives him an odd look, brief, assessing, filed away without comment, but doesn't argue. He and Sakura settle near the stream, pulling out rations, while Naruto drifts toward the edge of the clearing, ostensibly patrolling, actually doing something closer to hunting. He doesn't have to hunt long. The scroll appears first. That's the strange part. The first sign of what's coming isn't a person at all, but a small paper scroll, tumbling out of the underbrush at the far edge of the clearing and landing softly in the grass, as if someone had simply tossed it there and walked away. Sasuke's on his feet instantly, kunai drawn, eyes fixed on the tree lean where the scroll had come from. Sakura scrambles up beside him, reaching for her own weapon. Naruto, already closer to that side of the clearing than either of them, goes very still. There, Kurama says, and this time there's no ambiguity in the fox's tone at all. That's it. That's what's been circling us since last night. A figure steps out from between the trees. To any untrained eye, it looks exactly like what it's supposed to look like, a grass village genin, dressed in the plain, unremarkable garb of a foreign shinobi far from home, a long, high-collared coat that covers the arms and torso completely, hair drawn back in a simple tie, features pale and unreadable. Nothing about the figure screams danger. If anything, the posture is almost apologetic, hands loosely at their sides, head tilted slightly in a gesture that could pass for curiosity. My apologies, the figure says, voice smooth, almost gentle. I seem to have dropped this. Sasuke doesn't lower his kunai. Who are you? Just another genin, trying to survive this exam, the figure says, taking a slow step forward, retrieving the fallen scroll with unhurried, deliberate movements. Same as you three. It's a perfectly reasonable answer. It's also, Naruto realizes with a cold certainty settling somewhere in his chest, completely wrong. That's not a person, Kurama says, low and urgent now, all patience gone from the fox's voice. That thing's chakra is wrong. It's too controlled, too deep, layered under something else entirely. Whatever's standing in that clearing right now is not a genin, and it is not here by accident. Naruto's mind races, cataloging everything at once. The posture, deliberately unthreatening. The voice, deliberately calm. The scroll, deliberately dropped. A lure, not an accident, something designed to draw attention and create an opening for approach. And underneath all of it, a presence that feels, even to Naruto's still developing sense of chakra, deeply, fundamentally wrong, like static behind a smooth recording, audible only if you know to listen for it. Sakura hasn't caught any of that. To her, this looks like exactly what it's presenting itself as, a slightly odd but ultimately unremarkable foreign genin, possibly nervous, possibly looking to make a scroll trade. We don't have an earth scroll to trade, she says carefully, still tense but softening her stance slightly. Sorry. Oh, I'm not looking to trade, the figure says, and something in the smile that follows doesn't quite fit the rest of the expression, a fraction too wide, held a fraction too long. I was simply curious to see who else was making their way through this forest. It gets lonely out here, doesn't it? Sasuke's grip on his kunai tightens. Something about the phrasing, the tone, has finally started pricking at his own instincts too, even without Naruto's advantage. We should go, he says quietly, angling his body slightly to put himself between Sakura and the stranger. So soon? The figure's gaze shifts, slow, deliberate, unmistakably interested, and lands directly on Sasuke. Studies him, lingers there in a way that makes the hair on the back of Naruto's neck stand straight up. What a shame. I was hoping to see what you're capable of, Uchiha. The name lands like a dropped stone in still water. Sasuke's eyes narrow. How do you know my name? Everyone knows the name Uchiha, the figure says smoothly, recovering the slip, if it even was a slip, without missing a beat. Especially after what happened to your clan. Tragic, really? All that talent, wasted. It's a cheap shot, deliberately cruel, clearly designed to provoke exactly the reaction it gets. Sasuke's expression darkening, his chakra spiking with sudden, barely restrained anger, his stance shifting from defensive to something closer to aggressive. That's the play, Naruto realizes, watching it happen in real time. Get under Sasuke's skin. Make him angry. Angry people make mistakes. Sasuke, he says, low and sharp, cutting through the tension before it can fully ignite. Don't. Sasuke doesn't look at him. Stay out of this, Naruto. I'm serious. Don't take the bait. That gets Sasuke's attention, if only for a half second, a flicker of surprise at the certainty in Naruto's voice, quickly buried under the simmering anger still radiating off him. What bait? He's just talking. He's not just talking, Naruto thinks, watching the stranger's expression shift almost imperceptibly at the interruption, a flicker of something between amusement and mild irritation, quickly smoothed back over into that same unsettling calm. He wants a reaction. He's testing something. Testing us. You're perceptive, the figure says, and this time the words are aimed squarely at Naruto, the pale gaze shifting to settle on him with an intensity that feels like being pinned in place. More than I expected, for someone who failed the academy exam twice. The clearing goes very quiet. Sakura's eyes widen. That's not public information, not something a random grass genin should reasonably know about a leaf shinobi they've never met. Sasuke's attention snaps fully onto Naruto now, something calculating flickering behind the anger. Naruto keeps his own expression carefully blank, even as his pulse spikes and his mind races through the implications. He knows things about us he shouldn't. He's not testing Sasuke by accident. He's not talking to me by accident either. Everything about this is deliberate. Guess my reputation gets around, Naruto says, forcing the words into something light, something dismissive, even as every instinct screaming inside him insists this is the single most dangerous conversation he's ever had in his life. The figure's smile widens, just slightly. Reputation is a funny thing, isn't it? People decide who you are long before they actually know you, and once they've decided, a slow, almost thoughtful pause, it becomes very difficult to convince them otherwise. Don't you find that frustrating, Naruto Uzumaki? He knows my name too. He's known both our names this whole time. Not really, Naruto says, and this time the deflection comes easier, buoyed by something new settling into his chest. Not fear exactly, though there's plenty of that too, but a kind of sharpening clarity. He's playing a game. He wants to see how we react. He wants to know what we're capable of before he decides what to do with us, so don't show him anything real. Cool trick, knowing our names and stuff, Naruto continues, rocking back on his heels with exaggerated casualness, letting his voice climb back up into its familiar, grating register, loud, a little obnoxious, exactly the register that's made half the village dismiss him without a second thought. But we're kinda in the middle of an exam here, so if you're not trading scrolls, we're gonna get going. Come on, guys, it's a gamble. A big one. Every instinct in Naruto's body is screaming that turning his back on this thing, even partially, even for a second, is exactly the wrong move, and yet something deeper, something that's been quietly building all morning under Kurama's warnings and his own careful observations, tells him that the right move here isn't confrontation, it's disengagement. Controlled, deliberate, unhurried disengagement, the opposite of what this stranger seems to want. For a long moment, nobody moves. The figure's pale gaze flicks between the three of them, lingering on Sasuke, lingering longer on Naruto, and something unreadable passes behind those eyes. Then, unexpectedly, the tension breaks. How refreshing, the figure says, almost warmly, taking a slow step backward toward the tree line. Most genin in your position would either attack out of fear or freeze out of it. You've done neither. The pale eyes settle on Naruto one final time, and something in that gaze feels less like curiosity now and more like a decision being made. I look forward to seeing more of you, Naruto Uzumaki. Perhaps sooner than you'd like. And then, in a blur of motion too fast for Sakura to track and almost too fast for Sasuke, the figure is gone, vanished back into the tree line as suddenly and silently as it appeared, leaving nothing behind but a dropped scroll lying forgotten in the grass and a clearing that suddenly feels a great deal colder than it did 5 minutes ago. Nobody speaks for several long seconds. Sakura's the first to break the silence, letting out a breath she'd clearly been holding, kunai lowering slightly though her hand still trembles around the grip. What was that? A grass genin, Sasuke says, though even he doesn't sound convinced by his own answer. His eyes are still fixed on the tree line where the figure vanished, jaw tight, something dark and calculating working behind his expression. Weird one. That wasn't weird, Sakura says, voice climbing slightly. That was terrifying. Did you feel that? Right before he left, it was like the air got heavy. I could barely breathe. Killing intent, Naruto thinks, filing that detail away alongside everything else. He let it slip on the way out. On purpose. One last test. Naruto, Sasuke says, turning to face him directly now, something sharp and pointed in his tone. How'd you know not to react to that Uchiha comment? It's a fair question. It's also exactly the question Naruto's been dreading since the words left his own mouth a few minutes ago. Because there's no good answer that doesn't require explaining things he's not ready to explain. Not about Kurama, not about the strange, sharpening instincts he's been quietly developing, not about any of it. So he does what he's always done best. He deflects. Dunno, he says, scratching the back of his head with exaggerated obliviousness. Just seemed like the kind of thing someone'd say to mess with you. Figured getting mad was exactly what he wanted, so, didn't. It's not the whole truth. It's not even close to the whole truth. But it's true enough to hold up under scrutiny, vague enough to avoid further questions, and delivered with just enough of Naruto's usual scattered energy that Sasuke, after a long, considering pause, seems to accept it, filing it away, the same way he's been quietly filing away every other small inconsistency over the last 2 days, without yet putting the pieces together into a full picture. We should move, Sasuke says finally, sheathing his kunai. If he's still out there. He is, Naruto says before he can stop himself. Both Sasuke and Sakura turn to look at him. I mean, Naruto backtracks quickly, probably, right? Guy like that doesn't just wander off after all that buildup. Feels like the kind of thing where he's still watching, just, not right here. It's a reasonable enough guess dressed up as an obvious observation, and it passes without further comment. Though Sakura's eyes linger on him a beat longer than necessary, that same puzzled, half-formed suspicion creeping back into her expression. They gather their things quickly, moving with the kind of tense efficiency that comes after a genuine scare, and set off deeper into the forest, putting as much distance as they can between themselves and that clearing before the light starts to fade again. Naruto falls back into rear position without being asked, senses stretched wide, cataloging everything. And inside the quiet of his own mind, the conversation with Kurama picks back up almost immediately. That thing knew things it shouldn't have known, Naruto thinks. Names. History. Stuff that's not public. And he wasn't testing Sasuke by accident, was he? No, Kurama says, and there's something grim settling into the fox's voice now, something that sounds almost like recognition. That was not an accident. That was reconnaissance. Reconnaissance for what? I don't know yet. But I know what that chakra felt like, brat, even buried under a disguise. I've felt something like it before, a long, long time ago, and if I'm right about what, or who, that was, then this exam just became a great deal more dangerous than a piece of paper with a scroll on it. Naruto's stomach tightens. Who do you think it was? There's a long pause before Kurama answers, long enough that Naruto starts to wonder if the fox is going to answer at all. I'm not certain yet. And until I am, I'd rather not put a name to a fear that might be wrong. A beat. But whatever it is, whoever it is It's not finished with this forest. And it's not finished with your team either. Great, Naruto thinks, glancing ahead at Sasuke and Sakura's backs, both of them still tense, still shaken, both of them completely unaware of exactly how much worse this might get. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. They push hard for the rest of the afternoon, putting real distance behind them, and by the time the light starts fading toward evening, the strange encounter in the clearing has settled into something the three of them don't discuss directly but all clearly carry with them. A shared, wordless tension that colors every decision, every pause, every glance toward the treeling. Sasuke says little, withdrawn into his own thoughts, replaying the encounter over and over, turning the Uchiha comment and everything that came after it around in his mind like a puzzle he can't quite solve. Sakura stays close to the group, more watchful than usual, occasionally glancing toward Naruto with an expression that's shifted, subtly, from puzzled curiosity into something closer to real attention. The first sign that whatever pattern she's been half noticing over the last 2 days is starting to solidify into a question she intends to eventually ask out loud. And Naruto, walking rear guard with his senses stretched as wide as he can manage, spends the rest of the day doing something he's never really done before in his life: planning. Not the reckless, in-the-moment improvisation that's gotten him through most of his fights so far, but real, deliberate, forward-looking planning. Mapping terrain features as they pass, noting choke points, mentally marking places where a fight might favor them and places where it absolutely would not. Because if Kurama's right, if that thing in the clearing really is finished testing them and starting something else entirely, then Naruto has a feeling the next encounter isn't going to end with a polite retreat back into the trees, and when it comes, he intends to be ready for it, even if nobody else on his team has any idea he's been getting ready at all. What if Naruto outsmarted Orochimaru in the Forest of Death? Chapter 3, Setting the Trap. Last time, Team 7 came face to face with something wearing a grass genin skin and got a lot more than they bargained for. A name drop that shouldn't have been possible, a killing intent that stopped Sakura's breath in her chest, and a promise on the way out that this wasn't over. Naruto knows it isn't over. Kurama's basically confirmed it isn't over. The only problem is convincing the other 2 members of his team without explaining exactly how he knows what he knows. If you haven't watched chapters 1 and 2 yet, now's the time, because this is where Naruto stops reacting to this forest and starts working it. Subscribe, ring that bell, and let's get into it. Night falls differently on the second evening than it did on the first. The first night, Team 7 had made camp with the ordinary caution of genin on a dangerous exam, alert, but not afraid, treating the Forest of Death as a challenge to be managed rather than a threat actively hunting them. Tonight is different. Tonight, all 3 of them settle into their small defensible hollow beneath the roots with the specific, heavy quiet of people who've had a very close look at something they don't fully understand, and don't especially want to look at again. Sasuke takes first watch without being asked, kunai resting across his knee, eyes fixed unblinking on the treeline in a way that suggests he isn't planning to sleep much even when his watch ends. Sakura settles a few feet away, pulling her knees up to her chest, quieter than usual, occasionally glancing toward the trees like she expects that pale, smiling face to reappear at any moment. And Naruto sits slightly apart from both of them, ostensibly checking his gear, actually doing something else entirely, turning the events of the last 2 days over in his head, piece by piece, trying to fit them into a shape that makes sense. All right, he thinks, addressing the presence that's been unusually talkative today. Let's actually figure this out. What do we know? We know it's old, Kurama says. We know its chakra is buried under a disguise good enough to fool 2 trained shinobi eyes, which means whatever's underneath has had a very long time to get good at hiding what it really is. We know it singled out the Uchiha specifically, and we know it took a very particular interest in you once it realized you weren't going to be baited. So it's after Sasuke. That's what it wants you to think, Kurama says, and something in the tone makes Naruto pause. Think about it. The Uchiha comment was cheap. Obvious. The kind of thing you say when you want a predictable reaction, not the kind of thing you say when you're actually planning something delicate. But the way it looked at you afterward, that wasn't cheap. That was reassessment. Naruto sits with that for a long moment, watching Sasuke's rigid silhouette a few meters away, still keeping careful watch over a clearing that, for all any of them know, is being watched right back. You think it's not really after Sasuke? I think, Kurama says slowly, that whatever this thing wants, it hasn't decided yet whether it's you or him. And I think he'd be a fool to assume it's settled on an answer just because that's the answer that would be easiest to plan around. That's not a comforting thought. It's also, Naruto realizes with a familiar sinking feeling, almost certainly the correct one. Here's the problem Naruto's chewing on is the fire. Well, not an actual fire. They're not stupid enough to light one in a forest full of things drawn to smoke and warmth, but the metaphorical fire, the churning restless energy behind his eyes, burns through most of that second night's watch rotation. He can't tell Sasuke and Sakura the full truth. Not because he doesn't trust them, he does, more than he's ever admitted out loud to either of them, but because the full truth involves explaining a voice in his head that neither of them knows exists, explaining instincts he can't fully account for, explaining a level of tactical thinking that would raise exactly the kind of questions he's spent his whole life avoiding. How do you know that, Naruto? Since when do you plan like that, Naruto? What aren't you telling us, Naruto? And if he tells half the truth, just enough to explain the danger without explaining the source, there's a real risk they don't believe him at all. Why would they? He's the dead last of their genin class, the one who still can't reliably make a working clone, the one everyone assumes coasts through problems on luck and stubbornness rather than thought. Coming to Sasuke and Sakura with "Trust me, something ancient and dangerous is stalking us, and I need us to change our whole approach" isn't going to land, not from him, not without proof. So Naruto decides, somewhere in the small hours of that second night, that he's not going to argue his way into being believed. He's going to act his way into being useful, quietly enough that nobody stops him to ask why. That's a plan, Kurama says, sounding almost approving, which is rare enough that Naruto nearly does a double take. A real plan, for once, instead of just running and swinging. Don't let it go to your head. Wasn't planning on it, Naruto mutters, and for the first time since stepping through Gate 12, something in his chest settles into a kind of grim, focused determination that has nothing to do with his usual reckless confidence, and everything to do with the quiet, patient calculation of someone who's finally decided to stop reacting and start preparing. Morning comes gray and heavy, low clouds pressing down through gaps in the canopy, the whole forest wrapped in a kind of humid stillness that makes the previous day's tension feel even thicker in the air. Team 7 breaks camp with less conversation than usual, Sasuke withdrawn and calculating, Sakura watchful and quiet, Naruto humming under his breath in a deliberately careless way that doesn't match the focus behind his eyes at all. "We need that earth scroll," Sasuke says as they set off, voice flat and businesslike. "Faster we finish this exam, faster we're out of this forest." "Agreed," Sakura says. "Though after yesterday, I'm not exactly eager to run into another team." "We might not have a choice," Sasuke says. "Scrolls don't trade themselves." Naruto, walking a few paces behind, lets the conversation wash over him without fully engaging, his attention fixed instead on the terrain around them, the shape of the ground, the density of the trees, the places where the canopy opens and closes overhead. He's not just walking through this forest anymore. He's reading it, the same deliberate way he's been quietly teaching himself to read rooms and streets and people his whole life, except now he's applying it to something bigger, something that might actually matter in a way that could save all three of their lives. "See that ridge line up ahead?" He thinks, more to himself than to Kurama, though the fox is listening regardless. Steep drop on the far side. Good sight lines from the top. Bad approach from below. Anyone coming up that slope's gonna be slow and loud about it. "You're starting to sound like your sensei," Kurama observes. Yeah, well. Turns out he wasn't just talking to hear himself talk. They press on through the morning, and Naruto starts doing something small enough that neither Sasuke nor Sakura notices at first, small enough that even if they did notice, it wouldn't look like anything more than restless fidgeting. Every so often, as they pass through a particularly dense stretch of undergrowth, or cross a natural choke point between two large root systems, or skirt the edge of a clearing with good sight lines, Naruto lags a half step behind the group, presses two fingers briefly against the tree trunk, and moves on without comment. If Sakura had been watching closely, she might have noticed the faint shimmer of chakra each time, gone almost as soon as it appeared. She isn't watching that closely. Nobody is. That's rather the point. "What exactly are you doing?" Kurama asks, sounding genuinely curious for once rather than simply exasperated. Marking the path, Naruto thinks back. Chakra tags. Real faint ones, shouldn't register to anybody who's not specifically looking for them. If we come back through here, or if I need to find my way back to a specific spot fast, I'll be able to feel where I've been. And where did you learn to do that? Iruka-sensei mentioned it once, ages ago. Some old academy lesson about trail marking for tracking exercises. Everybody figured it was boring and useless. A small, humorless smile. Guess I was paying more attention than I let on. Kurama doesn't respond to that immediately, and when the fox finally does speak again, there's something almost like genuine surprise in the words. You've been doing this the whole exam, haven't you? Not just since yesterday. Since the gate, Naruto admits. Didn't really have a reason before. Now I've got one. By midday, they've marked a rough, winding trail of chakra tags through nearly 2 hours of terrain, invisible to anyone not specifically attuned to look for them, and Naruto has started layering in something else on top of it. A mental map, built piece by piece, of every defensible position, every good ambush point, every stretch of ground that would favor a fight and every stretch that absolutely would not. It's exhausting work, the kind of sustained focus that doesn't come naturally to him, and more than once he catches himself drifting, his attention snagging on something shiny or interesting or loud the way it always has, before he forces himself to drag it back to the terrain, back to the plan, back to the low, steady hum of purpose that's been building in his chest since that second sleepless night. This is hard, he admits, somewhere around the 2-hour mark, rubbing at his temple as another headache from sustained chakra sensing starts to build. Good, Kurama says. Means you're actually doing it right. Anyone can throw a punch when they're scared. Not many people can force themselves to think clearly when they're scared. That's the difference between a shinobi who survives and one who doesn't. Since when do you give pep talks? I don't, Kurama says flatly. I'm explaining tactics. If you want to mistake that for encouragement, that's your problem, not mine. Naruto grins despite himself, despite the headache, despite the low, persistent hum of danger that hasn't left the back of his mind since yesterday morning. It's not much, but it's something, and right now, something is more than he had 2 days ago. They stop again in the early afternoon at a wide, sheltered clearing, different from the one where they'd encountered the disguised stranger the day before, smaller, more enclosed, ringed by a dense wall of trees on all sides with only 2 clear approach paths. Sasuke calls the stop, citing the need to check their supplies and get a proper meal in before pushing on, and Sakura agrees readily enough, clearly still feeling the aftereffects of yesterday's encounter more than she's willing to admit out loud. Naruto uses the break for something else. I'm gonna go check the water source Sakura mentioned, he says, gesturing vaguely toward the sound of a distant stream. Won't be long. Want company? Sakura offers, already half standing. Nah, I got it. You guys eat, I'll be back before you've even finished your rations. It's a flimsy excuse and he knows it, but exhaustion and lingering unease have made both his teammates less inclined to push back than they might have been a day earlier, and Sasuke waves him off with barely a glance, already deep in his own thoughts. Sakura settles back down, still watching him go with that same faint, unresolved puzzlement, but says nothing further. Once he's out of sight of the clearing, Naruto doesn't head for water at all. He heads for the trees. Alright, he thinks, studying the clearing's layout with fresh eyes now that he's not performing casualness for an audience. If something's gonna come for us, it's gonna come from one of these 2 approaches. Question is which one, and what I can do about either. He starts with the wider approach, the more obvious path into the clearing, the one any normal team would default to using. Working quickly and quietly, he creates 2 shadow clones, watching them both flicker into existence with the familiar strain that clone jutsu always costs him. The 2 duplicates immediately fanning out to begin the actual work, one climbing into the low branches overhead to plant a chakra mark tag at height, the other working along the ground to disturb the undergrowth in a specific, deliberate pattern, nothing that would look intentional to an untrained eye, but enough to create a subtle funnel, narrowing the natural walking path toward one particular gap in the trees. What's the funnel for? Kurama asks, watching the clone work with something like professional interest. If somebody's tracking us and comes through here fast, not paying close attention to the ground, which, if they're confident enough, they might not be, they'll follow the path of least resistance. I want the path of least resistance to lead somewhere I choose, not somewhere they choose. And where does it lead? Naruto allows himself a small, humorless smile, glancing toward the narrower of the two approaches, the one currently disguised, thanks to his clone's work, as slightly less appealing than it actually is. Right into a spot with bad footing and a low branch overhang. Nothing that'll seriously hurt somebody who knows what they're doing. But enough to slow them down half a second. Enough to buy time. Half a second against something that took down a grass genin team without even trying isn't much, Kurama points out, not unkindly, just factually. I know, Naruto admits. It's not a plan to beat it. It's a plan to not be caught flat-footed if it comes back. Every second I can buy is a second we're not just standing there getting sized up again. It's not everything. Naruto knows that. A few chakra tags and a disturbed patch of undergrowth aren't going to stop whatever's out there if it decides to come at them seriously. But it's a start, the first piece of a much bigger picture he's only beginning to sketch out, built on the same quiet, patient observation that's been slowly reshaping how he moves through the world these past few weeks, whether anyone else has noticed it or not. He works for nearly 20 minutes before dispelling the clones and making his way back toward the main clearing, careful to circle around and approach from the direction of the stream so his story holds up if anyone checks. Sasuke and Sakura are exactly where he left them, rations mostly finished, both looking marginally more settled than they had 20 minutes ago. Find the water? Sakura asks. Yeah, it's not far, Naruto says, dropping down beside them and pulling out his own rations, the picture of unbothered normalcy. Nothing exciting. Just water. Sasuke studies him for a moment. Not suspicious exactly, more the same low-grade assessment he's been running on Naruto since the encounter yesterday. Like a puzzle he hasn't fully solved but hasn't stopped working on either. You've been weird since yesterday, he says bluntly. Naruto's chewing pauses for half a second before he forces himself to swallow and shrug it off. Weird how? Quieter. More careful. Sasuke's eyes narrow slightly. You didn't even complain about taking last watch last night. Guess I'm growing up, Naruto says, aiming for lighthearted and mostly landing it, though there's an edge underneath the words that he can't quite smooth away. Exam like this'll do that to a guy. It's not a satisfying answer, and Sasuke clearly knows it, but he doesn't push further, apparently deciding, for now, that whatever's going on with his teammate isn't urgent enough to demand explanation in the middle of a hostile forest. Sakura, however, doesn't let it drop quite as easily. You knew not to react to that Uchiha comment yesterday, she says quietly, once Sasuke's turned his attention elsewhere, checking their supplies. And you steered us around that ravine the day before, right before we heard that scream. And you took last watch without complaining, and you noticed the birds went quiet before we even reached that clearing. She's ticking the points off, one by one, and Naruto realizes with a slow, uncomfortable feeling that she's been keeping her own careful list this whole time. Same as he has. That's not nothing, Naruto. That's a pattern. There's no good deflection for that. Sakura's too sharp, too observant, and the pattern she's describing is real. He can't talk his way around data points that specific without either lying outright or getting closer to the truth than he's ready for. So he does something he's gotten reasonably good at over the years. He tells a version of the truth that's true enough to satisfy without giving away the whole picture. I've just been paying attention, he says, meeting her eyes directly for the first time since she started listing things off. That's it. That's the whole secret. I got scared enough after that guy in the clearing that I started actually watching stuff instead of just, I dunno, existing loudly and hoping it works out. It's not a lie. It's also not close to the whole truth. But something about the honesty in his tone, the genuine discomfort at being examined this closely, seems to land as sincere in a way that satisfies Sakura's curiosity, at least for now. Her expression softens slightly, some of the suspicion melting into something closer to reassessment. Well, she says finally, keep paying attention then. I mean it. Wasn't planning on stopping, Naruto says, and for once, that's the complete and total truth. They push on through the rest of the afternoon, and Naruto continues his quiet work wherever the terrain allows it. A chakra tag here, a subtle terrain adjustment there, always folded into some plausible excuse, always small enough to escape notice, always building, piece by piece, towards something he still doesn't have a complete picture of but is starting, slowly, to feel the shape of. Around mid-afternoon, they finally get the scroll encounter they've been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. A rival team, 3 genin from a smaller village, stumbling across their path near a rocky outcrop, clearly as scroll-hungry and exam-worn as Team 7 themselves. A brief, tense standoff follows, both teams sizing each other up, either immediately certain whether this is going to end in a fight or a negotiation. It ends, in the end, in a fight, not out of malice on either side, just simple scarcity. 3 teams competing over 2 scroll types in a forest that doesn't leave much room for diplomacy. But it's here, in the middle of an actual confrontation, that Naruto's quiet preparation over the last day finally pays its first small dividend. He recognizes the terrain. He'd marked this general area 2 hours earlier, cataloging sidelines and footing without knowing exactly why it might matter, and now, with 3 unfamiliar shinobi bearing down on his team, that groundwork translates into something immediately, tangibly useful. He knows exactly where the ground favors them, exactly which direction offers the best defensive position, exactly where a hasty retreat would lead into good cover versus exposed ground. This way! He shouts, breaking left toward a cluster of boulders he noted earlier, and something in the certainty of his voice, a certainty that's been building all day, even if either Sasuke nor Sakura fully understands where it's coming from, makes both of them follow without question, trusting the direction even without knowing the reasoning behind it. It works. Not perfectly, not without difficulty. There are a few tense minutes of exchange jutsu and close calls, Sasuke's fire techniques driving back one opponent, while Sakura's precise chakra control handles a second. But the terrain advantage tips things in their favor faster than it would have otherwise, and within a few minutes, the rival team disengages, retreating rather than risk further losses, leaving behind, in the chaos of their hasty exit, a single scroll, dropped and forgotten in their rush to escape. Sasuke picks it up, checks the seal, and his expression shifts into something like grim satisfaction. A scroll, he says. We've got both now. Nice, Naruto breathes out, adrenaline still coursing through him, the fight's aftermath leaving his hands slightly unsteady even as relief floods through his chest. Sakura, catching her breath a few steps away, glances toward the boulders they'd retreated to, then back toward Naruto with an expression that's shifted, once again, into something sharper, more focused. How do you know this spot was here? She asks. We haven't come this way before. And there it is again, the question Naruto's been quietly avoiding all day, circling back around at exactly the moment he has the least energy left to deflect it cleanly. Lucky guess he manages, which is thin, and he knows it's thin, and from the look on Sakura's face, she knows it's thin too, but she doesn't push it. Not now, not with adrenaline still fading and the immediate crisis handled and both scrolls finally in their possession. She just watches him for a long moment, filing it away. One more data point in a pattern she's clearly determined to eventually understand, before turning to help Sasuke reorganize their gear for the push toward the tower. Naruto lets out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, and beneath the surface, in the quiet space only he can access, Kurama's voice carries something that might, if Naruto didn't know better, almost be described as approval. That terrain work paid off faster than I expected. Wasn't planning for a fight. Just figured it'd help however it helped. That's exactly the point, Kurama says. You're starting to prepare for problems you haven't identified yet, instead of just reacting to the ones already in front of you. That's not luck, brat. That's the beginning of actual strategy. Naruto doesn't have a response for that, not one he trusts himself to think clearly right now. Exhaustion and adrenaline still tangled together in his chest, but something about the words settles into him anyway, quiet and heavy and real, like a shift he can feel happening even if he doesn't fully understand where it's leading yet. They make camp again that evening, both scrolls finally secured, the tower theoretically within reach now if they push hard over the next day or two. The mood around camp is lighter than it's been since before the encounter in the clearing. Genuine relief at having both scrolls, genuine confidence in having handled a real fight without serious injury. But Naruto doesn't let the relief fully settle in his own chest, not completely. Because even with both scrolls in hand, even with the immediate pressure of the exam's central challenge resolved, the deeper problem, the one that's been sitting cold and heavy in his guts since that second sleepless night, hasn't gone anywhere. It's still out there, he thinks, settling in for what he already knows is going to be another long, watchful night. We got the scrolls. That doesn't mean we're safe. That just means we're done being distracted by the thing that was never the real problem. Correct, Kurama says, quiet and serious in a way that leaves no room for reassurance. Whatever's been circling this forest since your first night here didn't stop caring about you just because you found a scroll. If anything, I'd expect it to move sooner now, not later. You're running out of reasons for it to wait. Naruto glances towards Sasuke, keeping first watch again with the same rigid, unbroken focus he's maintained since the encounter, and towards Sakura, curled beside the dying warmth of their small camp, finally getting something that looks like real rest for the first time in 2 days. Then I guess, he thinks, settling back against the roots, mind already turning over the terrain map he's been building all day, searching for gaps, searching for weaknesses, searching for the next piece of a plan he still doesn't fully understand the shape of. I'd better be ready before it decides to stop waiting. Somewhere out in the deep, patient dark of the forest of death, something ancient and unhurried continues its slow, deliberate circling, closer tonight than it was the night before, though none of Team 7 can know that yet. But Naruto, lying wide awake in the dark for the second night running, thinks he can feel it anyway. A pressure at the edge of his senses. A promise that hasn't been forgotten. I look forward to seeing more of you, Naruto Uzumaki. Perhaps sooner than you'd like. He doesn't know yet exactly how right that promise is about to prove. But for the first time since stepping through Gate 12, he thinks, quietly, carefully, without saying it out loud to anyone, that he might actually be ready for it when it comes. What if Naruto outsmarted Orochimaru in the Forest of Death? Chapter 4. The Mask Slips. Last time, Team 7 secured both scrolls after a hard-fought skirmish, and Naruto spent every spare minute of that second day laying groundwork nobody else on his team even knew existed. Chakra tags, terrain notes, a plan he still hasn't fully explained to anyone. Kurama's warning was clear: whatever's been circling this forest isn't finished with them yet, and it's running out of reasons to wait. If you've been with us since Chapter 1, you already know exactly how much is about to collide in these next few pages. Subscribe, ring that bell, and let's find out just how right Kurama was. The third morning in the Forest of Death starts the same way the last two did, gray light filtering weakly through a canopy too thick to let real sunlight through, the distant calls of birds and insects filling the air with a kind of false, ordinary calm. Team 7 breaks camp quickly, both scrolls secured deep in Sakura's pack, spirits noticeably lighter than they'd been the day before. If we push hard today, we could reach the tower by tomorrow morning, Sasuke says, studying the rough map they'd been issued, tracing a route with one finger. Maybe even tonight, if we don't run into trouble. Let's not jinx it, Sakura says, though there's real hope in her voice for the first time since the encounter in the clearing 2 days ago. Naruto says nothing, falling into his usual position at the rear of the group, senses already stretched wide the way they have been every waking moment since that second sleepless night. The relief his teammates are feeling, understandable, earned, entirely reasonable given they've cleared the exam's central obstacle, doesn't touch him the same way. He can't afford for it to. Not with the weight he's been carrying quietly in his chest since Kurama's warning first cut through the dark 2 nights ago. Anything? He asks, for what feels like the 100th time since they woke. Quiet, Kurama answers. Too quiet, if you're asking my opinion. It's been quiet like this before, and it didn't mean nothing was happening. It meant something was getting ready. Ready for what? That, Kurama says, and there's an edge to the fox's voice that Naruto's learned, over the last 2 days, to take very seriously, is exactly what worries me. They make good time through the morning, the terrain gradually shifting as they draw closer to the forest's center, the trees, if anything, growing denser rather than thinning, the ground beginning a slow, steady climb toward the elevated plateau where the tower waits. Naruto keeps up his quiet work as they go, marking terrain wherever the pace allows, cataloging sight lines and choke points with the same patient, obsessive attention he's been building since that first restless night. It's around midday, as they pause briefly to check their bearings against the map, that the quiet finally breaks. It doesn't break loudly. That's the thing that catches Naruto off guard. Even with 2 days of preparation behind him, he'd been braced for something dramatic, some sudden violent intrusion the way the first encounter had unfolded, a scroll tumbling out of the brush, a figure stepping calmly into view. This is different. This is quieter, and somehow, for exactly that reason, far more unsettling. The birds stop. Not gradually. Not the way birds usually go quiet, tapering off as something large and threatening approaches. All at once, mid-call, as if an invisible switch had been thrown across the entire clearing. Naruto's head snaps up. Beside him, he sees Sasuke go rigid too, the Uchiha's instincts, sharp as ever, catching the wrongness of the silence almost as fast as Naruto's own heightened senses do. Sakura, a half step behind both of them, only notices something's wrong when she sees their expressions shift. What? She starts. Quiet, Sasuke says, low and urgent, already reaching for a kunai. It's here, Kurama says, and there's no ambiguity left in the fox's voice at all, none of the cautious uncertainty from 2 days ago. Right here. Right now. And brat, it's not hiding anymore. The air changes. There's no other way to describe it. One moment, the clearing is simply tense, charged with the kind of pressure that comes from 3 shinobi realizing danger is close. The next moment, something vast and cold and unmistakably deliberate rolls over the space like a wave, pressing down on all 3 of them at once. A weight in the air that makes Sakura gasp audibly, makes even Sasuke's jaw clench hard enough to show, makes Naruto's own knees threaten to buckle despite 2 days of bracing himself for exactly this. Killing intent. Real, focused, and utterly without mercy. There, Sasuke breathes, and Naruto follows his gaze to the tree-line, where a familiar figure has stepped calmly into view, the same high-collared coat, the same pale, unreadable features, the same unhurried posture that had unsettled all 3 of them 2 days earlier. Except this time, there's no pretense of a dropped scroll. No polite introduction, just a slow, deliberate smile spreading across a face that has finally, completely, stopped pretending to be anything other than exactly what it is. Hello again, the figure says, voice as smooth and unhurried as before, though something underneath it now carries a weight that wasn't there in their first encounter, something ancient, and patient, and no longer bothering to hide. I did say I'd see you sooner than you'd like. Here's where 2 days of preparation either pays off or doesn't. And here's where it's worth pausing to appreciate exactly what Naruto's been building toward, because in the space of about half a second, everything he's quietly laid down over the last 2 days snaps into focus in his mind, cataloging itself into something close to an actual plan. This is it, he thinks, even as ice floods through his veins at the sheer, suffocating weight of the killing intent pressing down on the clearing. This is what I've been getting ready for. Focus, Kurama says, sharp and immediate, cutting through the fear before it can fully take hold. Fear is useful. Panic isn't. Don't let one become the other. Sasuke's already moving, putting himself between Sakura and the figure with the same protective instinct he's shown since the first encounter, kunai raised, chakra visibly gathering. Sakura, get back, he says, low and tight. What is he? Sakura manages, voice shaking but her own kunai already drawn, years of training overriding the fear enough to at least hold a defensive stance. The figure's smile widens at the question, as if genuinely delighted by it. An excellent question. Perhaps your teammate can answer it better than I can. The pale eyes shift, settling directly on Naruto with an intensity that feels almost physical. You've been paying very close attention these past 2 days, haven't you, Naruto Uzumaki? I wonder what conclusions you've drawn. Sasuke's head snaps toward Naruto, surprise breaking through his focus for just a moment. You knew he was still following us? Kinda figured, Naruto says, and to his own surprise his voice comes out steadier than he expects, the fear still very much present but no longer in control of him. Didn't seem like the type to just wander off. How perceptive, the figure says, taking a slow, unhurried step forward, and with that single step, the last remaining pretense of a grass genin seems to simply dissolve away, revealing something underneath that makes the temperature of the clearing feel like it's dropped several more degrees. The posture shifts, subtly but unmistakably, into something coiled and predatory. The voice, when it speaks again, carries an undertone that no genin, no matter how skilled, could ever produce. I confess I've grown genuinely curious about you these past 2 days. Most shinobi your age react to fear by either freezing or lashing out. You've done neither. You've been thinking. Who are you? Sasuke demands again, sharper this time, chakra crackling visibly at his fingertips. The figure's attention shifts back to him, almost lazily. But that would spoil the fun of finding out, wouldn't it? Though I suppose, given the circumstances, a proper introduction is only polite. And then, with a slow, deliberate motion, the figure reaches up and peels away the disguise entirely, skin shifting, features rearranging, the plain grass genin dissolving into something far older, far more distinctive, pale skin stretched over sharp, angular features, dark hair falling loose, eyes that have gone from merely unsettling to something reptilian and hungry, pupils slitted like a snake's. Naruto doesn't need Kurama to confirm what every instinct in his body is already screaming. Something about this presence, the depth of the chakra, the patience, the sheer, casual confidence of a predator who has never once doubted his ability to win, matches exactly what the fox described 2 nights ago. Old. Patient. Something that doesn't belong here, not the way the rest of this place belongs here. That's him, Kurama confirms grimly, the fox's voice carrying something that might, in a creature as ancient and battle-scarred as the Nine Tails, actually be described as wariness. I was hoping I was wrong. Who is he? A name you'll recognize from every warning your sensei's ever given you about the most dangerous shinobi still breathing, Kurama says. One of the Sannin. And brat, this one doesn't lose fights. Not against genin. Not against anyone most days. That should be terrifying. It is terrifying. Naruto can feel the fear sitting cold and heavy in his stomach, no amount of preparation fully able to erase the primal, animal instinct screaming at him to run. But underneath the fear something else is happening too, something that's been quietly building in him for 2 days, a cold, clear-eyed calculation that refuses to simply surrender to panic. If he doesn't lose fights, Naruto thinks, forcing the words into something steady despite the fear, then I'm not gonna try to win one. I'm gonna do something he's not expecting instead. Now you're thinking like a shinobi, Kurama says, and for the first time in this entire exam, there's something in the fox's voice that sounds almost like genuine approval. Orochimaru, Sasuke breathes, and the name lands in the clearing like a dropped weight, recognition and dawning horror crossing his face all at once. Even Sakura, whose knowledge of the more dangerous names in shinobi history is more academic than practical, goes visibly paler at the word. So the Uchiha does his homework, Orochimaru says, something almost fond in his tone, though it's the fondness of a collector examining a particularly interesting specimen rather than anything resembling warmth. I confess you were the one I came to this forest for, Sasuke-kun. Your eyes, your potential. The Sharingan is a rare and precious thing, and yours, I think, could become something truly extraordinary, given the right encouragement. Sasuke's stance shifts, torn visibly between fear and the particular, dangerous kind of pride that's always made him vulnerable to exactly this sort of provocation. I don't need anything from you. Everyone needs something, Orochimaru says softly, taking another slow step forward, and the pressure in the clearing intensifies with the movement, killing intent rolling out from him in a way that makes Sakura's knees actually buckle, forcing her to catch herself against a nearby tree trunk. Though I admit, this exam has given me an unexpected complication. His gaze slides back to Naruto. You. The single word carries more weight than it should, and Naruto forces himself to hold that gaze, forces himself not to flinch under the full, undivided attention of one of the most dangerous shinobi alive. Me, he echoes, keeping his voice as level as he can manage. I've spent 30 years studying what makes a shinobi extraordinary, Orochimaru continues, almost conversational now, circling slightly, forcing all 3 genin to track his movement. Bloodlines. Training. Raw talent. I've seen brilliance in 100 different forms across that time. A pause, and something genuinely curious flickers behind those slitted eyes. I have never once seen it in the shape you're wearing it, Naruto Uzumaki. The village's greatest failure, by every official measure, and yet here you stand, having correctly assessed, 2 days ago, that provoking you was a deliberate strategy rather than genuine insult. Here you stand, having noticed things your own teammates missed entirely. Tell me, how does the dead last of his class learn to think like that? He's fishing, Naruto realizes, even as the words land somewhere uncomfortably close to true. He wants to know what I am. Whether I'm actually dangerous, or just lucky. He hasn't decided yet. Then don't help him decide, Kurama says immediately. Give him nothing. Not fear, not pride, not confirmation of anything he's guessing at. Guess I got tired of being underestimated, Naruto says, keeping his tone light, almost bored, an exact mirror of the deflection that served him so well his entire life. Not really that deep. Orochimaru's smile sharpens. Isn't it? I think it's exactly that deep. I think you've been very carefully constructing a mask for a very long time, and these past 2 days, I've watched pieces of it slip. A pause, deliberate and cutting. I wonder what you actually look like, underneath all that noise. The words land harder than Naruto expects, striking uncomfortably close to something he's never fully articulated even to himself. The years of performing louder and dumber than he actually is. Because being underestimated has always, somehow, felt safer than being seen. He feels his jaw tighten, feels something hot and defensive rise up in his chest, and forces it back down with an effort that costs him more than he'd like to admit. Don't, Kurama warns, sensing the flare of emotion immediately. That's exactly what he's fishing for. Don't give it to him. Naruto exhales slowly, forcing the tension out of his shoulders, forcing his expression back into something easy and unbothered even as his heart pounds against his ribs. Dunno, he says. Guess you'll have to find out the hard way. Something flickers behind Orochimaru's eyes, surprise maybe, or perhaps something closer to genuine delight. How refreshing, he murmurs. Very well then. Let's find out. The attack, when it comes, is fast enough that Sakura barely registers the movement before it's already happening. Orochimaru's simply there, closing the distance between himself and Sasuke in what looks less like movement, and more like teleportation. One hand already extending toward the Uchiha's exposed neck with lethal, casual precision. Sasuke reacts on pure instinct, throwing himself backward, narrowly avoiding a strike that would have ended the confrontation in a single motion. Sakura screams his name, already moving to help despite every instinct telling her how badly outmatched she is. And Naruto doesn't freeze. He doesn't hesitate. 2 days of preparation crystallize in an instant into a single, immediate priority. Don't let this become a fight we can win by strength, because we can't win it by strength. Change what kind of fight this is. Sasuke split! He shouts, already moving himself, braking hard to the left, away from both his teammates, forcing Orochimaru's attention to divide across 3 separate directions instead of concentrating on a single, easily contained group. It's a gamble, and a dangerous one, splitting the team apart in the middle of a confrontation with one of the most dangerous shinobi alive goes against every basic tactical instinct any of them have ever been taught, and Sasuke's expression, for a fraction of a second, flashes with genuine confusion at the instruction, but there's no time to question it. Orochimaru's already moving again, and Sasuke, trusting the split-second call more out of necessity than full understanding, breaks right instead of following Naruto, putting real distance between himself and Sakura, who scrambles toward the tree lean on Naruto's earlier instruction, driven more by instinct than clear thought. Why did I just tell them to split? Naruto thinks, even as he's sprinting toward the edge of the clearing, toward the exact stretch of terrain he'd quietly marked and prepared 2 days earlier without knowing, at the time, exactly why it might matter. Because a fight against one enemy and 3 separated targets is a different problem than a fight against one enemy and one clustered group, Kurama answers immediately, chakra already flooding through Naruto's system in response to the danger, sharpening his senses, quickening his reflexes. He can't chase all 3 of you at once. Whoever he chases, the other 2 have time. Time to run, time to regroup, time to think. And if he chases me? Then you'd better be standing exactly where you wanted him to stand. Orochimaru's attention, predictably, splits for a moment, gaze flicking between 3 separating targets, calculating, weighing options with the casual confidence of someone who's never once doubted his ability to catch any of them regardless of the choice. And then, just as Naruto had hoped, feared, and quietly prepared for an equal measure, that attention settles fully on him. Interesting, Orochimaru murmurs, already moving, closing the distance between them with terrifying speed. Running toward the trees instead of away from me? Either very brave, or very foolish. Neither, Naruto thinks grimly, forcing his legs to carry him faster, driving toward the exact patch of terrain he marked 2 days earlier, the funnel he built, the disturbed undergrowth designed to guide anyone moving fast and unfamiliar with the ground toward a specific, less favorable path. Just prepared. The chase lasts less than 30 seconds, though it feels considerably longer, adrenaline stretching each moment into something sharp and vivid. Naruto weaves through the trees with a familiarity that surprises even him. 2 days of quiet, patient terrain mapping paying off in exactly the way he'd hoped. Every root and rock and low-hanging branch catalogued somewhere in the back of his mind, guiding his feet almost automatically even as fear and adrenaline threatened to overwhelm rational thought. Orochimaru closes the distance anyway. Of course he does. There's no realistic version of this chase where a genin outruns a sannin through open forest. But as they cross into the section of terrain Naruto had deliberately funneled 2 days earlier, something small but crucial happens. Orochimaru, confident and unfamiliar with the specific terrain, follows the path of least resistance exactly as Naruto had gambled he might, clipping through the exact patch of disturbed, deliberately awkward footing that Naruto's clones had prepared. It's not much. A half-second stumble, quickly recovered, barely worth noting under most circumstances. But half a second, against an opponent who's spent this entire encounter moving with terrifying, effortless precision, is the first crack in that precision Naruto's seen, and more importantly it's proof, real and tangible, that the preparation he's been quietly building actually works. It worked, he thinks, half disbelieving even as he uses the brief opening to put a few more meters of distance between them, ducking behind the cluster of boulders he noted during yesterday's skirmish with the rival team. It actually worked. Don't celebrate yet, Kurama warns immediately, chakra still surging through Naruto's system, senses stretched to their absolute limit. A stumble isn't a victory. It's an opening. Use it, don't admire it. Naruto doesn't need the reminder twice. Already, 3 shadow clones burst into existence around him, a technique he's practiced more than any other in his short career, the one jutsu he's always been genuinely, unusually gifted at. Chakra reserves deep enough to produce dozens of clones without the strain that would cripple most shinobi twice his age. The clones scatter immediately in different directions, each one carrying just enough of his chakra signature to create genuine confusion about which, if any, represents the real target. Orochimaru, recovering from the stumble, surveys the sudden multiplication of targets with an expression that shifts, for the first time since the confrontation began, from confident amusement into something closer to genuine, sharpened interest. Shadow clones, he murmurs, almost to himself. A common enough technique. And yet, his gaze sweeps across the scattered duplicates, searching for some inconsistency that would reveal the original among the copies. You're using them differently than most genin would. Not to attack, to obscure. He's figuring it out fast, Kurama warns. Doesn't need to figure it out slow, Naruto thinks back, already moving again, using the momentary confusion to put further distance between himself and the immediate threat, weaving deeper into terrain he'd carefully mapped 2 days earlier. Just needs enough time for the next part. Which is? Naruto doesn't answer immediately, too focused on the physical demands of movement and clone management at once. But the shape of the plan he's been quietly assembling for 2 days is finally fully coming into focus in his mind. Not a plan to defeat Orochimaru outright, nothing so grandiose or unrealistic. A plan to survive this encounter with his team intact. A plan to buy enough time, create enough confusion, and exploit enough of the terrain he's spent 2 days quietly preparing to ensure that whatever Orochimaru came to this forest to accomplish, he doesn't get to accomplish it today. Elsewhere in the clearing, Sasuke and Sakura are dealing with the fallout of the sudden split in their own ways. Sasuke, having broken right on Naruto's instruction, finds himself alone in a stretch of dense forest, chakra still crackling with adrenaline, torn between the instinct to regroup with his team and the growing, uncomfortable awareness that Naruto's split-second call might have actually been the right one. He can hear, distantly, the sounds of continued confrontation, the telltale hiss and crackle of a fight still unfolding somewhere behind him, and every protective instinct in his body screams at him to turn back, but he doesn't. Not immediately. Because underneath the instinct to help is a colder, more calculating awareness that's been building in him since the first encounter 2 days ago. If Orochimaru's primary interest really is him, his eyes, his bloodline, his potential, then the most dangerous thing Sasuke could possibly do right now is walk directly back into that interest. He wants me, Sasuke realizes, forcing himself to keep moving, putting further distance between himself and the sounds of the fight. Naruto knew that. That's why he told me to split off instead of toward him. He's trying to keep me away from becoming the target. It's an uncomfortable realization, the idea that Naruto, of all people, might have thought 2 steps ahead of him in the middle of a life-threatening confrontation. But there's no time to fully process the discomfort, not with Sakura still separated somewhere in the trees and an S-rank threat still active in the clearing behind him. Sakura, for her part, has made it to relative safety near the tree-line, chest heaving, kunai still clutched tight in one trembling hand, torn between fear for her own safety and a mounting, desperate worry for both of her teammates. She can hear the fight continuing, closer now, moving, shifting through the trees in a way that suggests pursuit rather than a stationary confrontation, and every instinct in her tells her to help, even as clear-eyed rationality reminds her exactly how outmatched she'd be if she tried. Naruto told me to run, she thinks, forcing herself to stay put despite every urge to move toward the danger. He had a reason. He's had a reason for everything these past 2 days, even when I couldn't figure out what it was. It's a strange thing, trusting someone she's spent years quietly underestimating. But 2 days of small, accumulated evidence, the ravine, the Uchiha comment, the terrain knowledge that shouldn't have made sense, have built something in her that looks, increasingly, like genuine trust, even if she still can't fully explain where it's coming from. So she waits, watching the tree line, praying that whatever Naruto's doing out there is enough. Back in the depths of the forest, the confrontation between Naruto and Orochimaru has settled into something that, from the outside, might almost look like a strange, deadly dance. Naruto weaving through terrain he's spent 2 days quietly memorizing, clones scattering and reforming to maintain confusion, Orochimaru pursuing with the patient, methodical confidence of a predator who's never once doubted the eventual outcome, even as small, accumulated inconveniences continue to chip away at the effortless precision he'd opened the encounter with. It's not a fight Naruto can win. He knows that with total, clear-eyed certainty, knows it in the aching strain of chakra reserves being pushed harder than they've ever been pushed, knows it in the growing fatigue settling into his legs, knows that every time Orochimaru closes the distance just a little too easily despite every obstacle Naruto's carefully placed in his path. But it's not a fight he needs to win. Not today. Today, all he needs to do is survive it, and delay it, and make it expensive enough that whatever Orochimaru actually came here to accomplish becomes just a little harder to complete. You're stalling, Orochimaru observes, catching one of the shadow clones and dispersing it with almost lazy precision, gaze sweeping the surrounding trees for the genuine target hidden somewhere among the chaos. An interesting choice. Most genin, faced with a hopeless fight, either surrender or panic. You've chosen something more patient. A pause, something almost approving in the observation. Tell me, Naruto Uzumaki, what exactly are you waiting for? Good question, Naruto thinks, breathing hard from behind the cover of a thick root system, watching another clone dissolve under Orochimaru's casual attention. What am I waiting for? The honest answer is that he doesn't fully know, not with certainty, not with the kind of clear tactical vision that would let him explain, step by step, exactly how this ends in his favor. What he has instead is instinct, sharpened over 2 days of quiet observation and preparation, telling him that patience is the only tool he has that Orochimaru doesn't seem to expect from him. Everyone underestimates him. Everyone always has. And right now, in the middle of the most dangerous fight of his life, that underestimation might be the only advantage he's got left. Kurama, he thinks, chakra reserves burning low, exhaustion pulling at every muscle. I need something. Anything. There's a pause, longer than usual, weighted with something that feels, even through the haze of adrenaline and fear, like genuine consideration. I can give you a little more, Kurama says finally, and Naruto feels something shift deep in his chest, a faint, warm pulse of chakra bleeding through the seal in a way it never has before, not the overwhelming, corrosive flood that's happened in moments of true desperation before, but something smaller, more controlled, more deliberate. Not much. Not enough to fight him. But enough to keep running. Enough to keep this going a little longer. Why? Naruto asks, genuinely startled by the offer. Because, Kurama says, and there's something almost grudging in the admission, you've actually earned it this time. Now move, brat. He's found your position. Naruto doesn't need the warning twice. He's already moving, the fresh surge of chakra steadying his exhausted limbs just enough to keep him ahead of Orochimaru's next strike. Weaving deeper into the terrain, he's spent 2 days quietly preparing, buying seconds, buying minutes, buying whatever fragile margin of time he can carve out of an encounter he was never supposed to survive at all. It's during one of these narrow escapes, ducking beneath a low branch he'd specifically marked 2 days earlier, using the awkward footing beyond it to force another half-second stumble out of his pursuer, that something shifts in Orochimaru's expression. The amusement that's colored this entire confrontation, the lazy, predatory confidence, gives way, for just a moment, to something sharper. Something that looks almost like genuine calculation. You're not running randomly, Orochimaru says, stopping mid-pursuit, gaze sweeping the surrounding terrain with fresh, careful attention. You've been here before. Recently. Naruto's blood runs cold. There's no point denying it. The pattern's too clear now, too deliberately used, and lying about something this obvious would only confirm exactly how much thought has gone into this whole encounter. Maybe, he says instead, forcing his breathing to steady, buying just a few more seconds of distance. You prepared this terrain, Orochimaru continues, and there's something in his voice now that's shifted entirely away from amused curiosity into something far more focused, far more dangerous. Before this confrontation even began, you knew I was still out there. You knew this was coming. There's no version of this conversation that ends with Naruto successfully talking his way out of the implications, so he doesn't try. He just holds Orochimaru's gaze, exhausted and afraid and running on fumes, and lets the silence answer the question honestly enough. Something shifts in Orochimaru's expression, the last remaining trace of casual amusement finally, completely giving way to something that looks, unmistakably, like genuine reassessment. How very interesting, he says softly, and for the first time since the confrontation began, he doesn't immediately close the distance again. Instead, he simply watches, something calculating and patient settling behind those slitted eyes. I came to this forest for the Uchiha's eyes. I find myself, instead, considerably more curious about you. This is it, Naruto thinks, chest heaving, chakra reserves nearly spent even with Kurama's borrowed assistance. This is the moment where it decides whether I'm worth killing right now or worth watching a little longer. The silence stretches, heavy and dangerous, the entire forest seeming to hold its breath along with him. And then, unexpectedly, Orochimaru laughs. A low, genuinely delighted sound that somehow feels far more unsettling than any amount of killing intent could have managed. 2 days, he murmurs, almost to himself. 2 days of preparation, built entirely in secret, deployed exactly when it mattered most. Tell me, Naruto Uzumaki, how much more of you is hiding behind that mask you wear so well? Naruto doesn't answer. Can't, really. Exhaustion and fear have stolen whatever wit he might normally reach for, leaving him standing there, chest heaving, watching one of the most dangerous shinobi alive study him like a puzzle box he's only just realized might actually be worth solving. I think, Orochimaru continues, taking a slow step backward instead of forward, I've grown rather more interested in watching you than in finishing this today. A pause, and something in his expression sharpens into promise rather than threat. The Uchiha's eyes will still be there when I want them. But you, I think, deserve a proper test. Something worthy of whatever it is you've been so carefully hiding. What does that mean? Naruto manages, voice hoarse, every muscle in his body screaming with exhaustion. It means, Orochimaru says, already beginning to fade back into the tree-line, the pressure of his killing intent finally, gradually receding from the clearing, that I look forward to finding out exactly what you're capable of, Naruto Uzumaki. Properly this time. Not distracted by pretty eyes and old grudges. The last trace of his presence lingers at the edge of the trees, a final, unsettling smile stretching across pale features. Rest well. You've earned it. And do give some thought to what you'll show me next. And then, as suddenly and completely as he'd appeared, Orochimaru is gone, vanished into the deep, patient dark of the forest of death, leaving Naruto standing alone in a clearing torn apart by the confrontation, chakra reserves scraped nearly to nothing, heart still hammering against his ribs. For a long moment, Naruto simply stands there, unable to fully process the fact that he's still breathing, still standing, still, and possibly, against every reasonable expectation, alive. Kurama, he thinks, voice unsteady even in his own head. Did that actually just happen? It happened, Kurama confirms, and there's something in the fox's tone that sounds, for the very first time since Naruto's known him, genuinely shaken. You didn't win that fight, brat. Understand that clearly. He let you survive it. But you gave him something to actually think about instead of simply killing you, and that is not nothing. That's not nothing at all. Before Naruto can process that further, the sound of running footsteps cuts through the clearing. Sasuke and Sakura, both having heard the fight, finally go silent, both moving as fast as their own exhaustion allows toward the last place they'd heard the confrontation unfolding. Naruto! Sakura's voice reaches him first, relief and terror tangled together as she bursts through the tree line, Sasuke close behind her, both of them skidding to a stop at the sight of him standing alone in the torn-up clearing, exhausted but unmistakably, miraculously unharmed. You're okay, Sasuke breathes, and there's something in his voice, disbelief, mostly, but underneath it, something that sounds almost like genuine relief, that Naruto's never quite heard from him before. Yeah, Naruto manages, legs finally giving out from beneath him, sitting down hard against the nearest tree trunk, chakra reserves completely spent, adrenaline finally, fully draining away and leaving nothing behind but bone-deep exhaustion. Yeah, I'm okay. Sakura drops down beside him immediately, checking him over with the same practiced urgency she'd bring to any battlefield injury, though there's nothing to find beyond exhaustion and a few minor scrapes. What happened? Where did he go? What did he want? Naruto opens his mouth to answer, and finds, for the first time in this entire exam, that he doesn't have a ready deflection prepared. The mask he's worn his whole life, loud, careless, easily dismissed, feels, in this exact moment, too heavy and too thin all at once to hold up properly. I don't know, he admits finally, and it's the most honest thing he's said to either of them in days. But I don't think he's done with us. I think he's just getting started. Sasuke crouches down slowly across from him, studying his teammate with an expression that's shifted, completely and irrevocably, from suspicion into something closer to genuine, unsettled respect. How did you survive that? He asked quietly. That was Orochimaru, one of the Sannin. And you just outran him. Outmaneuvered him. For how long? Naruto doesn't have a clean answer for that either, not one that doesn't involve explaining 2 days of secret preparation, a voice in his head that neither of them knows exists, and instincts he still doesn't fully understand himself. So he settles for the truth, stripped down to its simplest, most honest shape. I've just been paying attention, he says quietly, echoing the same deflection he'd offered Sakura 2 days earlier, except this time, exhausted and stripped of pretense. The words carry a weight neither of them can mistake for simple modesty. Sakura and Sasuke exchange a long, wordless look, the same look people give each other when a picture they've been slowly assembling finally, completely clicks into place. Since when, Sakura says slowly, have you been paying that much attention? Naruto, too exhausted to deflect any further, simply closes his eyes and lets his head fall back against the tree trunk. Since I got tired of being the one everyone underestimates, he says quietly. Guess it's working out okay so far. Overhead, the canopy stirs faintly in a breeze none of them can feel, and somewhere deep in the forest, unseen and unheard, something ancient and patient continues watching, already turning over the shape of whatever comes next. What if Naruto outsmarted Orochimaru in the Forest of Death? Chapter 5. Outsmarting the Sannin. Last time, Naruto did something nobody, not Sasuke, not Sakura, not even Naruto himself, if he's being honest, thought was possible. He survived a direct confrontation with Orochimaru, one of the legendary Sannin, using nothing but 2 days of quiet preparation and a plan nobody else on his team even knew existed. And Orochimaru didn't just let him live. He walked away impressed, promising to come back for a proper test. If you've been with this story since Chapter 1, you already know Naruto spent this whole exam getting ready for exactly this moment. This is the chapter where that preparation finally pays off in full. Subscribe, ring that bell, and let's watch a genin outsmart a legend. Nobody sleeps well that night. Team 7 makes camp barely an hour after the confrontation, too shaken and too exhausted to push further before dark, settling into a defensible hollow between two massive root systems that Naruto, even running on fumes, even with his chakra reserves scraped down to almost nothing, had automatically clocked as a good position the moment they'd stumbled across it. Sasuke takes first watch, same as always, except tonight there's something different in the way he holds himself. Less like a shinobi standing guard against generic forest danger, more like someone standing guard specifically because he now knows, with absolute certainty, exactly what's out there. Sakura sits close to the small, carefully shielded fire they'd risked lighting for warmth, arms wrapped around her knees, replaying the day's events in a loop she can't seem to break. And Naruto lies flat on his back, staring up at the thin slivers of gray sky visible through gaps in the canopy, feeling more exhausted than he's ever felt in his life, and yet somehow unable to fully close his eyes. You still there? He thinks, reaching inward for the familiar presence that's been unusually active these past 3 days. Where else would I be? Kurama says, dry as ever, though there's something underneath the familiar sarcasm tonight. Something that sounds, if Naruto's being honest with himself, almost like lingering unease. Rest. You'll need it. He wasn't lying about coming back. You think it'll be soon? I think, Kurama says slowly, that Orochimaru does not make idle promises. And I think whatever he meant by a proper test is not something he intends to delay simply out of politeness. Naruto exhales slowly, watching his own breath fog faintly in the cool night air. Then I guess we better be ready. You already started being ready 3 days ago, Kurama points out. The only difference now is that your teammates finally know it. That, at least, is true. And it's the thing sitting heaviest in Naruto's chest as he finally, eventually, drifts into a thin, restless sleep. Not fear of what's coming, though that's certainly there too, but the strange, unfamiliar weight of being seen by the two people whose opinion of him has mattered most for years, in a way he's spent his entire life carefully avoiding. Morning comes gray and heavy again, the 4th day of the exam dawning with a tension that none of them bother pretending isn't there. They eat in near silence, packing camp with brisk efficiency, and it's Sasuke who finally breaks the quiet, voice low and direct in a way that makes it clear he's been turning the question over all night. You knew this exam wasn't just about scrolls, he says, not quite a question. Before yesterday. You knew something was wrong from the start. Naruto considers deflecting again. Old habits die hard, and 3 days of quiet preparation haven't fully erased a lifetime of hiding behind noise and misdirection. But something about the exhaustion in his bones, and the genuine weight in Sasuke's question, makes the deflection feel pointless now, too small for the moment they're actually standing in. Yeah, he admits. Pretty much since the first night. How? Sakura asks, quieter than Sasuke, though no less intent. This is the moment. The one Naruto's been dreading since that first sleepless night. The moment where the easy answers run out, and he has to decide how much of the truth he's actually willing to share. He glances between them, weighing it, and settles, finally, on something close to the whole picture, minus the one detail he's still not ready to explain. I don't know how to explain it exactly. Instincts. A kinda sixth sense for when something's off. It's not the whole truth. It leaves Kurama entirely out of the explanation, but it's close enough to honest that it doesn't feel like a lie, and it's the most he's ever admitted to either of them about the strange, sharpening awareness that's been building in him for weeks. Felt something wrong that first night. Been trying to get us ready for it ever since. Sasuke studies him for a long moment, something calculating behind his dark eyes, not suspicion exactly, something closer to genuine reassessment, the kind of look you give someone when you realize you've fundamentally misjudged them for years. That's why you kept marking the trees. The terrain notes. All of it. Yeah, and yesterday, Sakura starts, then stops, seeming to reconsider the question before finally asking it plainly. How did you know that terrain would slow him down? How did you know any of it would work against someone like that? Naruto shrugs, the gesture carrying more weight than his usual careless version of it. I didn't know for sure. Just figured, even someone that strong's gotta be moving through the same physical world as the rest of us. Bad footing's still bad footing. Confusion's still confusion. Figured if I couldn't outfight him, maybe I could outthink him instead. There's a long pause after that, long enough that Naruto starts to wonder if he's said too much, revealed too much of the calculation that's been running underneath his usual scattered energy this whole exam. But when Sasuke finally speaks again, what comes out isn't suspicion or discomfort. It's something Naruto's genuinely never heard directed at him before, not once, not in all their years on the same team. Teach me, Sasuke says. Whatever you were doing yesterday. If he's coming back, I want to actually help, not just be a target he's fixated on. It's such an unexpected request that Naruto actually blinks, caught fully off guard for the first time all morning. You want me to teach you something? Don't make it weird, Sasuke mutters, though there's no real heat behind it. Sakura, watching the exchange, finally allows herself something close to a real smile, small and tired but genuine. I want him too. If we're actually facing him again, I'd rather go in with a plan than just hope for the best. And that small, simple offer of trust from two people who've spent years seeing him as the weakest link on their team, settles something in Naruto's chest that 3 days of quiet, isolated preparation never quite managed to. This is new, he thinks, glancing between his two teammates. Use it, Kurama says simply. Whatever's coming today, you're not facing it alone anymore. That matters more than you probably realize. They spend the next 2 hours doing something Team 7 has never really done before, actually planning together, as equals, pulling what each of them knows into something bigger than any one of them could manage alone. Naruto walks them through everything he's pieced together, the terrain features he'd already mapped, the chakra tags scattered through the last stretch of forest, the small but real vulnerabilities he'd glimpsed in yesterday's confrontation. Sasuke, once he understands the shape of what Naruto's been doing, contributes something Naruto hadn't fully considered, actual tactical knowledge, drawn from years of more formal training, about how to structure an ambush that accounts for an opponent's likely reactions rather than just their likely movements. Sakura, meanwhile, brings her own considerable strengths to bear, precise chakra control, a sharp analytical mind for identifying weaknesses in a plan before they become fatal flaws, and a genuinely impressive memory for the specific properties of the sealing tags Naruto's been using, having apparently studied basic Fuinjutsu theory more thoroughly than either of her teammates realized. These tags, she says, examining one of the spares Naruto's been carrying, turning it over between careful fingers. They're disruption tags, right? Basic academy-level stuff, meant to interfere with chakra flow in a localized area. Yeah, Naruto says. Iruka-sensei taught us the theory ages ago. Never really thought I'd use it for anything. They're good for exactly what you've been using them for, Sakura says, but they could be better. If we layer them properly, overlapping the disruption radius instead of just scattering them randomly, we could create a much larger dead zone, somewhere his usual level of chakra control would actually struggle. Naruto stares at her. You can do that? I can try, Sakura says, a flicker of nervous determination crossing her face. I've never done it at this scale before. But I understand the theory well enough to attempt it. It's a small moment, but an important one, the first time in this entire exam that Naruto's quiet, solitary preparation transforms into something genuinely collaborative, each of them contributing pieces the others don't have, building toward a plan that's stronger for including all 3 of them instead of just one. This is what real teamwork looks like, Kurama observes, something almost approving in the fox's tone. Funny, you've had 2 teammates capable of this the whole time, and it took nearly dying to a Sannin for all 3 of you to actually use it properly. Yeah, well, Naruto thinks back, watching Sasuke and Sakura work through the terrain map with real focus, genuinely engaged in a plan for the first time all exam. Better late than never. By mid-morning, the plan has taken shape. Not a plan to defeat Orochimaru outright, because all 3 of them understand, with clear-eyed realism, that a direct fight against the Sannin isn't a fight 3 genin can win through strength alone. Instead, it's a plan built entirely around control of the terrain, control of the engagement, control of exactly what Orochimaru is allowed to see and interact with when, not if, at this point, but when, he returns. The core of it rests on something Naruto had started building instinctively 3 days ago, and only now, with his teammates' help, fully understands the shape of, use his opponent's own confidence against him. Orochimaru had spent yesterday's encounter treating Naruto as a curiosity worth testing rather than a genuine threat worth taking seriously from the start, and if that assumption held, If Orochimaru approached today's proper test with even a fraction of that same casual, predatory confidence, then that confidence itself became the single greatest vulnerability they had to work with. So the plan, Sasuke summarizes, crouched over the rough terrain sketch they've been building in the dirt, is to let him think he's testing us on his terms, while actually pulling him through terrain we've prepared, into a position where he's the one who's actually trapped. Pretty much, Naruto says. He already underestimates me. If he thinks he's just watching a genin improvise under pressure, he's not gonna notice we've actually got a real structure underneath it until it's too late. And if he does notice? Sakura asks, voice tight with the honest fear none of them have fully shaken since yesterday. He's not stupid, Naruto. He already caught on to the terrain thing once. Then we adapt, Naruto says, and there's something steadier in his voice now than there's been at any point in this exam. Not the reckless confidence he usually leans on, but something quieter, more grounded. That's the whole point of doing this together instead of just me alone. If one piece breaks, we've got two more people who can improvise around it. It's not a perfect plan. None of them pretend otherwise. But it's real, built on genuine collaboration and genuine trust for the first time in Team 7's short history together. And as the three of them finish laying the last pieces of terrain preparation, ceiling tags layered at key choke points, sightlines mapped and accounted for, a rough sequence of fallback positions worked out in case the primary plan collapses, Naruto finds himself feeling something he hadn't expected to feel heading into a second confrontation with one of the most dangerous shinobi alive. Something close to actual readiness. Orochimaru returns just past midday, and this time, there's no pretense at all, no disguise. No polite introduction. No dropped scroll designed to create a plausible excuse for approach. He simply appears at the edge of the clearing Team 7 has spent the last several hours quietly, carefully preparing. The same coiled, predatory posture from yesterday's confrontation, the same slitted, hungry eyes, though today there's something almost eager in his expression, like a collector finally about to unwrap a particularly interesting gift. I did say I'd return, he says, voice carrying easily across the clearing despite its quiet, unhurried tone. I hope you've spent the intervening hours productively, Naruto Uzumaki. Something like that, Naruto says, forcing his voice into something steady, something that doesn't betray the careful preparation sitting just beneath the surface of this apparently casual response. Orochimaru's gaze sweeps across the clearing, taking in Sasuke and Sakura standing at Naruto's flanks, both visibly tense but holding their positions with the kind of deliberate steadiness that comes from actually having a plan rather than simply reacting to fear. Ah. Reinforcements. How touching. A pause, something faintly mocking creeping into his tone. Though I confess, I'm not entirely certain what two more genin add to this particular equation. He's underestimating them too, Naruto thinks, filing the observation away immediately. Good. That's exactly what we need. Guess you'll find out, Naruto says. Something flickers behind Orochimaru's eyes, not quite concern, not yet, but a flicker of genuine curiosity. The same kind of attention he'd shown yesterday right before the confrontation properly began. Very well then. Show me what 3 days of preparation actually amounts to. The engagement begins the way engagements with someone at Orochimaru's level almost always begin, fast, overwhelming, and immediately dangerous. He closes the distance between himself and the trio in a blur of motion, killing intent flooding the clearing with the same suffocating weight as yesterday. And for a fraction of a second, despite every hour of preparation, despite every carefully laid plan, raw animal fear threatens to override all three of them at once. But this time, they've prepared for exactly that moment. Now! Naruto shouts, and all three of them break in prearranged directions, not the chaotic, instinctive scattering of yesterday's confrontation, but a deliberate, coordinated movement, each of them peeling off toward a specific point in the terrain they'd spent the morning preparing, forcing Orochimaru's attention to divide across 3 simultaneous, structured threats instead of a single panicked group. Orochimaru adjusts instantly, shifting his approach towards Sasuke first, the most obvious threat, the bloodline he'd originally come to this forest seeking, closing the distance with terrifying speed. But as he crosses the specific stretch of ground Sakura had spent the morning carefully preparing, something happens that catches even his considerable reflexes slightly off guard. The layered ceiling tags she'd painstakingly arranged flare to life simultaneously, chakra disruption rippling outward across a much wider radius than any single tag could produce alone. It's not enough to stop him. Nothing short of overwhelming force could actually stop someone at Orochimaru's level. But it's enough to disrupt the smooth, effortless flow of his chakra for a crucial half-second, throwing off the precision of his approach just enough that Sasuke, braced and ready, unlike yesterday's panic scramble, manages to redirect the attack with a well-placed substitution technique instead of simply absorbing the full force of it. Clever, Orochimaru murmurs, recovering instantly, though something in his tone has shifted, genuine surprise, quickly masked but not quite fast enough to hide entirely. Fuinjutsu. Interesting. I wasn't aware genin were still taught proper disruption theory. We're full of surprises, Sakura says, voice shaking slightly with adrenaline but holding steady, already moving to reposition for the next phase of the plan. Orochimaru's attention shifts between the three of them, calculating, and Naruto can practically see the moment his opponent's initial assumption, that this proper test would be a simple matter of watching a talented but ultimately outmatched genin improvise under pressure, begins, for the first time, to genuinely crack. Good, Naruto thinks, already moving into the next phase of the plan, drawing on chakra reserves that feel steadier today than they did yesterday, bolstered by real rest, and, if he's honest, by the simple fact that he's no longer facing this alone. Keep him guessing. Keep him reassessing. Every second he spends figuring out what we're actually doing is a second we're controlling instead of him. The next several minutes unfold in a way that neither Naruto, nor Sasuke, nor Sakura could have fully predicted, even with hours of careful planning behind them, a strange, shifting dance across terrain deliberately prepared to favor confusion over confrontation, each of them drawing Orochimaru through a sequence of choke points and disruption zones designed not to defeat him outright, but to systematically erode the effortless confidence he'd carried into this confrontation. Shadow clones scatter and reform at key moments, drawing attention and creating openings. Sasuke's fire techniques, deployed with careful timing rather than raw aggression, force Orochimaru to expend effort on defense rather than simply pressing forward unopposed. Sakura's precise chakra control keeps the layered ceiling tags active and shifting, creating a moving pattern of disruption zones that makes it genuinely difficult for Orochimaru to predict exactly where his chakra will flow smoothly and where it won't. And Naruto does the thing he's spent 3 days quietly training himself to do, the thing that's finally, fully coming together in this exact moment. He reads the fight as it unfolds, adjusting the plan in real time, finding the small gaps between his teammates' contributions and filling them with exactly the right terrain knowledge, exactly the right misdirection, exactly the right moment to redirect Orochimaru's attention just enough to keep the engagement moving in their favor. You're coordinating this, Orochimaru observes, breathing slightly harder than he had at the start of the encounter, a small detail, but a telling one. The first genuine sign of real effort this confrontation has drawn out of him. Not simply reacting. Directing. Kinda my thing now, Naruto says, and there's real confidence in the words this time, not the forced deflection of yesterday's encounter, but something earned through hours of genuine preparation and, for the first time, genuine teamwork. How long? Orochimaru asks, something sharp and calculating cutting through his earlier amusement entirely. Have you actually been planning something like this? Since the first night, Naruto admits, and watches something shift behind those slitted eyes. Not fear. Orochimaru's clearly well beyond simple fear at this point in his long, dangerous career, but something that looks, unmistakably, like genuine reassessment of exactly what he's dealing with. 3 days, Orochimaru murmurs. You've been building this for 3 entire days. Layered underneath every other action you took in this forest, hidden from your own teammates until circumstances forced your hand. A pause, and something almost admiring creeps into his voice, twisted through with the same predatory hunger that's colored this whole encounter from the start. That is not the mind of a genin, Naruto Uzumaki. That is not even the mind of most jonin I've encountered. He's genuinely impressed, Naruto realizes, even as exhaustion starts creeping back into his limbs. Chakra reserves burning down faster than he'd like. And impressed is dangerous. Impressed means he's not gonna hold back anymore. Then it's time for the actual trap, Kurama says, urgency cutting through the fox's usual dry commentary. You've bought enough time. You've drawn him far enough. Finish it, brat, before he decides admiration isn't worth the trouble of continuing to play along. Here's the piece of the plan that Naruto's held back until exactly this moment. The piece he'd worked out that morning with Sasuke's tactical insight and Sakura's fuinjutsu knowledge. The piece designed specifically to exploit the one thing about Orochimaru's approach to this entire encounter that's remained consistent from the very beginning: his genuine, deeply rooted curiosity about exactly what Naruto is capable of. Because a predator who's testing his prey, rather than simply killing it outright, has to actually engage with that prey on some level. Has to let the test continue long enough to see its results. And that single, unavoidable requirement, the fact that Orochimaru genuinely, personally wants to see what Naruto can do rather than simply ending things quickly, is exactly the vulnerability 3 days of preparation has been quietly, patiently building toward. You want to see what I'm capable of? Naruto calls out, deliberately raising his voice, deliberately drawing Orochimaru's full attention back to himself even as Sasuke and Sakura shift into the final positions they'd rehearsed that morning. Fine. Here it is. He forms the hand seal, and dozens of shadow clones burst into existence simultaneously across the clearing. Not the handful he managed yesterday, exhausted and running on borrowed chakra, but a genuine flood of them, drawing on reserves that feel, for the first time in this entire encounter, almost limitless. It's the one technique Naruto's always been unusually, inexplicably gifted at. Chakra reserves deep enough that the strain most shinobi would feel producing even a handful of clones simply doesn't touch him the same way, and he's never once, until this exact moment, fully understood how to actually weaponize that natural advantage rather than simply using it for pranks and distractions. The clones scatter immediately, flooding the clearing, each one moving with just enough independent purpose to create genuine, overwhelming confusion about which target, if any, represents the real threat. Clones again, Orochimaru says, and there's something almost disappointed in his tone, like he'd expected something more novel from all this careful build-up. Surely you don't expect sheer numbers to accomplish what a single one couldn't. Not the numbers, Naruto says, and for the first time in this entire encounter, allows himself something close to a genuine, confident grin. The numbers are just a distraction, because that's exactly what they are, a screen, a flood of misdirection drawing Orochimaru's attention across the entire clearing at once, forcing him to divide his considerable but not infinite focus across dozens of simultaneous, individually unremarkable targets. And underneath that screen, exactly as the morning's careful planning had intended, Sasuke and Sakura complete the final piece of the trap, a full ring of Sakura's layered ceiling tags, activated simultaneously across a wide perimeter that Orochimaru, distracted by the flood of clones, hasn't fully registered closing in around him until the chakra disruption slams into effect all at once. It's not a cage. Not literally. Someone at Orochimaru's level could almost certainly break free of a simple disruption field with enough effort and time. But that's exactly the point. It doesn't need to hold him forever. It just needs to hold him long enough, disrupt his chakra flow thoroughly enough, that the effortless, predatory confidence he's carried through this entire encounter finally, completely breaks. Interesting, Orochimaru says, and for the first time since the confrontation began, for the first time, Naruto suspects, in longer than either of them could guess, there's a genuine flicker of something that looks almost like surprise crossing his features, chakra flow visibly disrupted, movements suddenly, momentarily less than perfectly fluid. A containment technique. Clever, layering it beneath a distraction rather than presenting it directly. A pause, calculating, testing the edges of the disruption field with careful, measured movements. Though I confess I'm curious what you imagine this accomplishes. I've broken far sturdier containments than this. Wasn't trying to hold you forever, Naruto says, watching carefully, gauging exactly how much time the trap has actually bought them. Just needed you distracted long enough for the real plan. Something shifts in Orochimaru's expression, the first genuine flicker of concern Naruto's seen from him across 2 entire confrontations, calculating rapidly through implications he clearly hadn't fully accounted for. The real plan, he echoes. Yeah, Naruto says, and nods toward the tree line behind him, where 3 of the shadow clones, the ones carrying real chakra rather than the diminished, disposable variety flooding the rest of the clearing, have spent the entire engagement quietly, patiently completing the actual purpose Naruto assigned them from the very start, reaching a specific, elevated position at the edge of the clearing, a natural rise in the terrain that Naruto had mapped days earlier and set aside for exactly this moment. The clones complete a final, coordinated jutsu, nothing especially powerful on its own, a basic wind-nature technique that any competent genin might manage, but deployed with precise, deliberate timing directly into the disrupted, unstable chakra flow currently rippling through the containment field surrounding Orochimaru. The two forces collide, and the resulting disturbance, not an attack designed to actually harm him, but a carefully calculated destabilization of an already compromised chakra flow, sends a visible ripple of genuine disruption through Orochimaru's normally flawless control, forcing an actual stumble, an actual break in his composure, for the first time across 2 entire days of confrontation. The clearing goes very quiet. For a long moment, nobody moves. Orochimaru straightens slowly, recovering his balance and his composure with visible effort, the disruption field still faintly active around him, chakra flow only gradually settling back into something resembling its usual effortless precision. When he finally speaks, his voice carries none of the amused, predatory confidence that's colored every previous moment of this encounter. You planned this from the very start, he says slowly, gaze sweeping across the clearing, the scattered, dissolving clones, the carefully positioned ceiling tags, Sasuke and Sakura holding their ground with real, earned confidence instead of desperate improvisation. The terrain. The tags. This entire confrontation. You anticipated I would return, and you built an entire trap around that certainty. Yeah, Naruto says, breathing hard, chakra reserves genuinely spent now, but standing his ground anyway, refusing to let exhaustion show in anything but his labored breath. Pretty much. Something shifts behind Orochimaru's eyes, not fear still, even now, but something that looks, for the first time in this entire encounter, genuinely, thoroughly recalculated. The casual, predatory curiosity that's defined every previous moment of interaction has given way to something colder, more focused, the expression of someone forced to seriously reassess a target they'd badly, fundamentally underestimated. I came to this forest, Orochimaru says slowly, expecting to test a bloodline everyone already recognizes as valuable, and stumbled instead into something considerably rarer. His gaze fixes fully on Naruto, and there's a weight to it now that feels different from anything before, not the casual curiosity of yesterday, but something closer to genuine, wary respect. A mind capable of planning 3 days ahead, coordinating 2 teammates into a genuinely effective trap, and executing all of it under the exact pressure meant to prevent precisely that kind of clear thought. A pause, and something almost bitter enters his tone. I have not been caught this thoroughly off guard by a genin in longer than I care to admit. Guess that makes today kind of a big deal. Then, Naruto manages, forcing a tired grin despite the exhaustion pulling at every part of him. Orochimaru studies him for a long moment, something calculating and dangerous still very much present behind his eyes, but tempered now with genuine, unmistakable reassessment. It does, he agrees finally. Though I suspect you understand this changes very little about the actual danger you're in. I am still considerably more powerful than you, Naruto Uzumaki. Today's cleverness bought you a delay, not a victory. Didn't need a victory, Naruto says, echoing the same quiet certainty he'd carried into this whole confrontation. Just needed you to leave without getting whatever you actually came here for. And there it is, the real point of everything they'd built today, laid bare in the open air between them. Orochimaru's expression flickers, something like grudging acknowledgement crossing his sharp, pale features, and for a long, tense moment, the outcome of this entire confrontation hangs genuinely, uncertainly in the balance. Then, slowly, deliberately, Orochimaru begins to laugh, the same low, unsettling sound from yesterday's encounter, except today it carries something different underneath it. Something that sounds, unmistakably, like genuine, reluctant delight. Very well, he says, already beginning to withdraw, the disruption field's lingering effects and the sheer, unexpected thoroughness of the trap apparently enough to convince him that pressing the confrontation further isn't worth whatever additional surprises Team 7 might have left in reserve. You've earned your delay, Naruto Uzumaki. Savor it. His gaze sweeps once more across all 3 of them, Naruto, exhausted but standing, Sasuke, tense but resolute, Sakura, drained but genuinely, visibly proud of what she'd contributed. Though do understand, this is not an ending. It's a postponement. I do not forget being outmaneuvered, and I do not forgive it easily either. Wouldn't expect you to, Naruto says. Until we meet again then, Orochimaru says, already fading back toward the tree line, presence receding with the same gradual, deliberate withdrawal as the day before, though this time carrying none of the casual, unthreatened confidence he'd walked away with previously. I look forward to seeing exactly how far that mind of yours can actually be pushed. And then, for the second time in as many days, he's gone, vanished into the deep, patient dark of the forest of death, leaving behind a clearing torn apart by the confrontation. 3 exhausted genin left standing amid the wreckage of a plan that had, against every reasonable expectation, actually worked. For a long moment, nobody speaks. The adrenaline that's carried all 3 of them through the last several minutes begins, gradually, to drain away, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion that none of them can fully fight off. We did it, Sakura says finally, voice unsteady, disbelief and exhaustion tangled together in equal measure. We made a Sannin retreat. Yeah, Sasuke says, and there's something in his voice that Naruto's genuinely never heard directed at him before. Not just relief, not just exhaustion, but something that sounds, unmistakably, like real, earned respect. We did. Naruto sinks down against the nearest tree trunk, legs finally giving out beneath the weight of 3 days of accumulated exhaustion, and allows himself, for the first time since this whole ordeal began, to simply breathe. Couldn't have done it without you too, he says quietly, and means it completely. Sakura settles down beside him, still catching her breath, studying him with an expression that's shifted, completely and finally, from the puzzled uncertainty of the last 3 days into something clearer, more settled. How long, she asks, have you actually been this capable? And don't say lucky guess this time, Naruto. I mean it. Naruto considers the question for a long moment, exhaustion and relief making the usual instinct to deflect feel, for once, genuinely unnecessary. Honestly? He says. I don't really know. Guess I just needed a reason to actually try. Sasuke, crouching nearby, studies him with the same calculating, reassessing expression Orochimaru had worn just minutes earlier, though the weight behind it feels entirely different now, not wary curiosity, but something closer to genuine recognition of a teammate he'd fundamentally, thoroughly misjudged. You should try more often, he says simply. It's not much. It's not some grand, dramatic declaration of respect. But coming from Sasuke, coming after everything the last 3 days have put all of them through, it lands with a weight that Naruto feels settle somewhere deep in his chest, warm and unfamiliar and entirely, genuinely earned. Somewhere overhead, the canopy stirs faintly, and the ordinary sounds of the forest, birds, insects, the distant rustle of wind through impossibly dense leaves, slowly, gradually begin reasserting themselves. The immediate danger finally, genuinely receded. But none of them are foolish enough to believe this is truly over. Orochimaru's parting words linger in the air long after his presence has faded. This is not an ending. It's a postponement, and somewhere out there, beyond the boundaries of this forest entirely, word of what just happened in this clearing is already, quietly, beginning to spread.